Story 1. My husband said, drunk at the party, I married the wrong sister. He didn't know I was behind him, hearing everything. I should have noticed the way his eyes lingered. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. Scattered across 8 years like breadcrumbs, I was too busy, too trusting, too willing to explain away. But you never really think your husband married you as a placeholder for someone else. You never think that someone else is your own sister. The company Christmas party was at some upscale hotel downtown. The kind with crystal chandeliers and waiters in bow ties carrying trays of champagne. I wore the green dress my husband had picked out, the one he said brought out my eyes. I remember feeling pretty that night, confident even. I remember thinking we looked good together as we walked in. His hand on the small of my back, guiding me through the crowd of his coworkers and their spouses. I should have known something was wrong when he started drinking heavily. He usually nursed one beer all night at these things, always worried about maintaining his professional image. But that night, he was downing whiskey like water, his face getting redder, his laugh getting louder. His boss came over at one point, made some joke about holiday cheer, but I caught the concerned look he shot me before walking away. The explosion happened near the buffet table. I was talking to one of the other wives, someone's name I can't even remember now, when I heard his voice rise above the music and chatter. He was standing with a group of his colleagues, swaying slightly, and one of them must have said something about families or sisters or I don't even know what. But suddenly, my husband was laughing this bitter, ugly laugh. You want to know something funny? He slurred, and the whole group went quiet. Some of them were already backing away, that universal instinct to avoid a drunk person about to say something they shouldn't. I married the wrong sister. There, I said it. The room didn't actually go silent. That's what they say in movies, right? That everything stops. But it didn't. The music kept playing. People kept talking. The world kept spinning. It was just my world that stopped. I stood there holding my plate while he kept talking, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them back for years. My wife's sister. You met her at the summer picnic, remember? That's who I really wanted. But she was too young when we met, just 16. So I waited. I dated her sister instead. Kept myself in the family. Figured I'd have my chance eventually. One of his colleagues tried to grab his arm, but he shook him off. But then she went off to college, started dating other people, and I panicked. So I married this one instead. Second prize is better than no prize, right? I don't remember dropping the plate. I just remember his face when he finally turned and saw me standing there. The way the drunken bravado drained out of him in an instant. Honey, wait. I didn't mean. But I was already walking toward the exit. Everyone's staring now. Definitely staring. I heard him stumbling after me, calling my name. The valet brought our car around and I took the keys, told him my husband was too drunk to drive. I drove home in complete silence. He tried to talk, his words still slurred, but I turned up the radio and focused on the road, on breathing, on not driving us into a ditch. The kids were asleep when we got home. The babysitter took one look at us and practically ran out the door. I went straight to our bedroom and started pulling out suitcases from the closet. That's when he grabbed my arm. What are you doing? I yanked away from him. What does it look like? You can't just leave. We need to talk about this. You want to talk now? After you announce to your entire office that I'm your consolation prize. He slumped against the door frame. I was drunk. People say stupid things when they're drunk. Drunk people say true things they're usually smart enough to hide. So, thank you for finally being honest after 8 years. I called my sister from the bathroom with the door locked. When she answered, her voice sleepy and confused, I told her everything he said. My voice broke halfway through. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, I'm coming to get you. Pack whatever you and the kids need. I'll be there in 20 minutes. You don't have to. He's been obsessed with me this whole time. And he married you as what? A placeholder? No. Pack now. She made it in 15. I heard her pound on the door hard enough to wake the neighbors. My husband opened it. Still drunk, still stupid enough to try his charm. Hey, look. I know your sister called you, but everything's fine. I didn't. I didn't hear what she said to him. I was upstairs waking the kids, telling them we were having a sleepover at Auntie's house. My daughter asked if she could bring her stuffed rabbit. My son asked if Daddy was coming, too. I said, "No, just us this time." My sister was in the doorway with her arms crossed, my husband backing away from her. "I'm leaving with them tonight," she said flatly. "And if you try to stop me, if you contact her, if you even drive past my building, I will make your life hell. Understand?" He nodded. "Good. Stay away from me, too. You're dead to me." We loaded the kids and suitcases into her car while he stood on the porch watching. The kids fell back asleep in their car seats within minutes. I stared out the window at the dark streets, the Christmas lights still twinkling on some houses. Everyone else's lives continuing normally while mine had just imploded. "Are you okay?" My sister asked quietly. I laughed, and it came out wrong, borderline hysterical. No, I'm really not." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You will be. I promise you will be." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But right then, at 3 o'clock in the morning, driving away from my house and my marriage and the life I thought I had, I couldn't imagine ever feeling okay again. The next morning, I woke up on my sister's couch, disoriented and aching. The kids were already up watching cartoons. My sister appeared from the kitchen with coffee. "They ate cereal," she said. "Hope that's okay." My phone had 32 missed calls and 60-plus text messages, all from my husband. The first few were apologetic, begging me to come home. By message 15, he was angry, saying I was being dramatic. By message 40, he was back to pleading, promising therapy, swearing he loved me. I blocked his number. "Good," my sister said. "What else do you need?" "A divorce lawyer, probably." That conversation with our parents was worse than I expected. My mom cried. My dad went silent in that way he does when he's absolutely furious. By the end of the call, he'd hung up to drive to our house. My mom wanted to come straight over, but I asked her to wait. I needed time to figure out what to tell the kids. I spent that first week in a fog. My sister stayed with me, helping with the kids, running interference with phone calls and questions I couldn't handle yet. The kids went to school like normal because I was determined not to disrupt their routines more than necessary. My dad went to the house the morning after everything happened. He wouldn't tell me exactly what he said, but my husband sent me a single text from a different number after that, saying my father had threatened him. I screenshotted it and sent it to the lawyer my sister had already called for me. The lawyer's name was Denise, sharp and no nonsense. She listened to my story in her office, taking notes. "Do you have any evidence?" she asked. "Text messages? Emails? Anything where he's mentioned your sister or his feelings?" "Just what he said at the party." "There were witnesses. Dozens of them." "That's good. We can subpoena witness statements if needed." She flipped through her notes. "What I'm hearing is a pattern of emotional abuse and deception. The courts will take that seriously." Emotional abuse. I'd never thought of it like that. But sitting in that office, I started to remember other things. The way he'd suggest I wear my hair like my sister wore hers. How he'd mentioned that my sister's laugh was so infectious. The time he'd asked if I'd ever considered contact lenses because my sister's eyes looked so much brighter without glasses. "I need to check something," I told my sister when I got back to her apartment that afternoon. "I need to go back to the house." "I'm coming with you." We went after school pickup, the kids staying with my parents for a few hours. The house looked the same from the outside. But when I unlocked the door, I could see evidence of him living there alone. Dishes in the sink, mail piled on the counter, his jacket thrown over a chair. Smelled stale like old takeout and unwashed laundry. I went straight to our bedroom, to his nightstand. There was something I needed to check, something that had been nagging at me for months. He always kept that drawer locked when I was around, claimed it was just work documents and old receipts he needed to organize. I'd accepted that explanation the same way I'd accepted everything else, because questioning your spouse's privacy feels like a betrayal of trust. Except now I knew what real betrayal looked like. I opened the drawer, pushed past the usual items, books and chargers and receipts, until my fingers found something at the back. A journal. Leather-bound, expensive-looking, the kind you buy intending to use for important thoughts. The kind I'd given him for his birthday 3 years ago, actually, telling him maybe writing things down would help with his work stress. I sat on the edge of our bed, our marital bed, where we'd conceived both our children, and opened it. The first entry was dated 9 years ago, a full year before we were even married, before he'd even proposed. Saw her again today. It read, she was visiting from college, staying at their parents' house for the weekend. She's 19 now, still too young, still not ready. But watching her laugh at dinner, seeing how she's grown, I know I'm making the right choice, staying with her sister. Keep myself in the orbit. Stay patient. Good things come to those who wait. My hands started shaking. This wasn't recent confusion or a passing thought. This was planned. This was calculated. This was 9 years of deliberate deception documented in his own handwriting. I turned the page. Entry after entry spanning years, plans and observations and calculated moves. How he'd proposed to me right after my sister got engaged to someone else because he needed to secure his position in the family. How he'd been relieved when my sister broke up with that boyfriend 6 months later. How he'd maneuvered to sit next to her at family gatherings. How he'd memorized her interests and opinions so he could agree with her. One entry from 4 years ago, right after our daughter was born. The second baby cements everything. 2 kids create obligations that can't be dissolved easily. She's bound to me now through the children, which means her family is bound to me, including the sister. Long game is working. How he'd decided to have children with me because that would cement the connection permanently, make it impossible for anyone to cut me out. Another entry from 2 years ago. Convinced her to cut her hair shorter like her sister wears it. She actually thanked me for the suggestion, said it's more practical with the kids. Doesn't realize I just want her to look more like the person I actually want. I photographed every page with my phone, my hands shaking so badly some of the pictures came out blurry. My sister stood in the doorway watching, her face getting paler with each page I turned. I'm going to be sick, she said, and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard her retching, heard the water run. I kept photographing. There were 67 pages. 67 pages of obsession and manipulation and cold, calculated planning. When I was done, I stood up and looked around the bedroom with new eyes. How many nights had I slept next to him while he was thinking about her? How many times had he touched me while imagining someone else? We need to leave, my sister said from the doorway, her face wet where she'd splashed it. We need to get out of here right now. I agreed. I took the journal with me. Evidence held tight against my chest as we locked the door and left. In the car, neither of us spoke for several minutes. I'm sorry, she finally said, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry this happened to you because of me. This isn't because of you. I told her and I meant it. This is because he's sick. This is because he's a predator who saw you when you were 16 years old and decided to use me to get close to you. None of this is your fault. But I could see she didn't believe me. Not entirely. And honestly, I wasn't sure I believed it either. Not yet. I was too angry, too hurt, too confused to know what I believed about anything anymore. When we told my parents about the journal, my dad actually punched a wall. My mom sat down hard on my sister's couch and put her face in her hands. My son wandered out of the bedroom where he and his sister had been playing, took one look at all of us, and asked in a small voice if something was wrong. Everything's okay, buddy? I lied, pulling him into a hug. The grown-ups are just having a serious talk. Why don't you go play with your sister for a bit longer? He went, but he kept looking back over his shoulder, not quite believing me. Smart kid, too smart sometimes. My parents stayed for dinner that night, helping my sister cook while I sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing. My mom kept touching my shoulder as she passed. These little reassuring pats that made me want to scream. I didn't want reassurance. I wanted someone to tell me this was all a nightmare and I could wake up. You need to eat something, my sister said, putting a plate in front of me. Pushed it away. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten all day. I said, I'm not hungry. She didn't push it, just moved the plate to the side and sat down across from me. Denise called me back. She said, those journal entries are incredibly damaging to his case. She's talking about using them to argue for full custody, for increased spousal support, everything. I looked up at her. I don't want to fight about custody. The kids love him. He's their father. He's a manipulative narcissist who used you for 8 years. He's also the person who taught our son to ride a bike and reads bedtime stories every night. People can be terrible in some ways and still be capable of genuine love in others. My sister leaned back, studying me. You're still protecting him. I'm protecting my kids. There's a difference. But was there? I didn't know anymore. The lines between everything had gotten so blurred. I started seeing a therapist named Miriam the following week, someone who specialized in emotional abuse. Her office was in one of those converted houses downtown, all soft lighting and comfortable furniture. I broke down in the first 15 minutes. I keep wondering if I missed signs. I sobbed. If I was just stupid and blind. Manipulative people are often exceptionally skilled at hiding their true intentions, Miriam said calmly. That's what makes them successful manipulators. The fact that you trusted your husband doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. We talked about how abuse doesn't always look like what people expect. How sometimes it's subtle, a slow erosion of self-worth. How I'd been comparing myself to my sister my entire marriage without even realizing it. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to? Miriam asked. Not because you thought it would make him happy, but just because it brought you joy? Couldn't remember. That realization sat heavy in my chest for days. The divorce papers came faster than I expected. He filed first, which Denise said was typical narcissist behavior, trying to control the narrative by being the first to take action. He was asking for 50-50 custody of the kids, for me to waive spousal support, and for an even split of all assets, despite the fact that he drained our joint savings account in the days after I left. This is ridiculous, Denise said, slapping the papers down on her desk during our meeting. He's trying to paint himself as the victim here, like you're the one who destroyed the marriage. What can we do? We fight. We submit the journal entries as evidence of his manipulative behavior and pattern of deception throughout the marriage. We get statements from the witnesses at the Christmas party. We show that this wasn't a simple case of growing apart, but rather a fundamental betrayal of trust that makes his claims of equal blame absurd. The kids were having a hard time adjusting. My son's teacher called to say he'd been getting into fights at recess. My daughter started wetting the bed again. They asked when they could go home. When Daddy was coming to get them. When can we go back to our house? My son asked one night as I tucked him in. We're going to find a new house just for us 3. But I like our house. My toys are there. We'll get your toys. Promise. And you'll still see Daddy. This isn't about you or your sister. This is about Mommy and Daddy needing to live separately. Forever. His eyes were huge in the dim light. Maybe, but that doesn't mean Daddy doesn't love you. That never changes. I kissed his forehead and left before he could ask more questions I didn't have answers for. In the living room, my sister was on her laptop and she looked up when I came out. I found some apartments in your price range, she said. Near the kids' school, so they won't have to switch. My price range. I laughed bitterly. You mean the price range of someone whose husband emptied their bank accounts? I mean the price range of someone starting over. But Mom and Dad said they'd help with the deposit. I can't ask them to do that. You're not asking, they're offering. Let them help you. I looked at the apartment listings on her screen. Small, mostly 1 or 2 bedrooms. The kind of places college students and divorcees lived. The kind of places I'd never imagined I'd be looking at in my 30s with 2 kids. How did this become my life? I asked, not really expecting an answer. My sister closed her laptop. It became your life because your husband is a piece of work, who manipulated you for 8 years. But this is also your life now. You're free from him, building something new. It's not the life you planned. But maybe it'll be better than what you had. Maybe you'll finally get to figure out who you are when you're not trying to be whatever he wanted. I wanted to believe her. But right then, sitting in her apartment after putting my confused kids to bed, looking at depressing apartment listings and facing down a divorce that was going to drain whatever money I had left, I couldn't quite make myself hope for anything better. The first custody exchange happened 3 weeks after I'd moved out, at a neutral location Denise had insisted on. A coffee shop parking lot, public enough that he wouldn't try anything stupid, she'd said. I didn't think he was violent, but then again, I'd thought a lot of things about him that had turned out to be wrong. He pulled up in his car exactly on time, and I watched him get out, watched him straighten his shirt and run a hand through his hair, preparing himself, getting into character. The kids were excited, bouncing in their seats, because they hadn't seen him in weeks. And no matter what he'd done to me, he was still their dad. "Daddy!" My daughter shrieked, launching herself out of the car the second I opened the door. He caught her, lifted her up, buried his face in her hair. When he looked up at me over her head, his eyes were red. "Can we talk?" he asked. "No, please, just for a minute. I need to tell you." "Get the kids settled," I said coldly. "You have until Sunday at 6. Not a minute later. He flinched like I'd slapped him, but nodded. My son hugged me goodbye, whispering that he loved me, and then they were gone, buckled into his car, driving away. I stood in that parking lot for a full minute after they'd left, feeling like I just handed over the most precious parts of myself to someone I couldn't trust. My sister was waiting when I got back, and she took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. "They'll be okay," she said. "Kids are resilient. What if he tells them his version? What if he makes me the villain? Then you tell them the truth when they're old enough to understand it. But right now, they just need both their parents to be stable and present. You can't control what he does on his time. You can only control what you do on yours." The weekend the kids were gone was the longest 50 hours of my life. I cleaned my sister's apartment top to bottom, reorganized her kitchen cabinets, did laundry that didn't need doing. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't stop imagining what they were doing, whether they were happy, whether he was taking care of them properly. "You need to breathe," my sister said on Saturday afternoon, physically taking the dish towel out of my hands. "They're fine. He's their father. He's not going to let anything happen to them. He's also a manipulative narcissist who used me as a placeholder for 8 years. Those things can both be true. He can be a terrible husband and a decent father simultaneously." Sunday at 5:30, I was already in that parking lot waiting. He pulled up at 5:53, the kids tumbling out with stories about the zoo and ice cream and the movie they'd watched. They smelled like his cologne and different laundry detergent. These tiny reminders that they'd been in a world I wasn't part of. "Mommy, Daddy said we could go to his new apartment next time," my daughter announced. "He has a swimming pool." "That's nice, honey." I looked at him over their heads. "A new apartment?" He shrugged, not quite meeting my eyes. 2 bedrooms. I wanted them to have their own space when they visit. "Must be expensive." "I manage." He hesitated. "They asked about you. All weekend. They asked when they could see you. They're with me most of the week. I'm sure they'll survive." "That's not what I meant." He looked genuinely hurt, which was almost funny considering what he'd put me through. "I told them you love them, that this isn't their fault. I want you to know that I'm not trying to turn them against you." How generous. I opened my car door, helped the kids get buckled in. "See you next Friday." I drove away before he could say anything else. In the rearview mirror, I watched him standing there in the parking lot, hands in his pockets, looking lost. A tiny part of me, a part one hated, felt sorry for him. "Mommy," my son asked from the back seat, "are you and Daddy going to get back together?" "No, honey, we're not. But Daddy said he's really sorry and he wants to fix things." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Sometimes sorry isn't enough to fix what's broken. Sometimes things break in a way that can't be repaired. And the healthiest thing is to accept that and move forward. "I don't understand." "I know, and that's okay. You don't have to understand it right now." The mediation session was scheduled for early October, and I showed up with Denise and a folder full of evidence. The journal entries, statements from 3 witnesses at the Christmas party, bank records showing how he drained our accounts. My husband arrived with his own lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit who definitely cost more than I could afford. The mediator was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who'd probably seen 1,000 divorcing couples. She looked at both of us with the kind of weary patience usually reserved for toddlers having tantrums. "Let's start with custody," she said, opening her files. His lawyer immediately launched into a speech about how my husband was a devoted father who'd always been present in his children's lives, who'd coached their soccer teams and attended every school event, who deserved equal time with them. Denise countered with the evidence of manipulation and deception, arguing that someone who deceived his wife for 8 years couldn't be trusted to prioritize his children's emotional well-being over his own needs. The mediator held up a hand. Unless there's evidence of abuse or neglect specifically toward the children, the court typically favors shared custody arrangements. "What about emotional abuse toward their mother?" Denise asked. "What about the psychological impact of witnessing their father's deception?" "The children weren't present for the incident at the Christmas party. They haven't witnessed any abuse directly." My husband looked relieved. I felt sick. We moved on to finances, and that's when his lawyer played their card. My family had money, they argued. My sister had taken me in immediately. I had a support system and resources that my husband didn't have. Why should he have to pay spousal support when I was clearly not in financial distress? "My client's wife left him without warning," his lawyer said smoothly. "She took the children in the middle of the night, blocked his calls, and refused all attempts at communication or reconciliation. She's being supported by her family, living rent-free with her sister, while my client is struggling to afford a 2-bedroom apartment suitable for his children's visits." I wanted to scream, to stand up and shout that I'd left because he'd publicly humiliated me, because I'd discovered 8 years of lies, because staying would have destroyed me. But Denise put a hand on my arm, keeping me quiet. My client left because she discovered, quite publicly, that her entire marriage was based on her husband's obsession with her younger sister, Denise said calmly. She slid copies of the journal entries across the table. "These documents show years of calculated manipulation and deception. This wasn't a simple case of falling out of love. This was sustained psychological abuse." The mediator read through them, her expression never changing. My husband's face went pale, then red. His lawyer whispered something to him urgently. "This is invasive," his lawyer protested. "My client's private journals are evidence of motive and character in this divorce proceeding," Denise interrupted. "The court needs to understand why my client felt she had no choice but to leave immediately, and why any claims that she's at fault for the dissolution of this marriage are absurd." The mediator kept reading. My husband slumped in his chair, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him again. Almost. Then I remembered sitting at that Christmas party and the sympathy evaporated. "Mr. Dalton," the mediator said finally, using his last name in that formal way that meant business. "These entries are deeply concerning. They show a pattern of deception that, while not illegal, certainly explains why your wife felt the marriage was irretrievably broken." "I was young when I wrote those," he said desperately. "I was confused about my feelings. It doesn't mean I didn't love her, that I don't love her." "Did you or did you not marry your wife while harboring romantic feelings for her sister?" "It's not that simple. Yes or no?" He was silent for a long moment, then quietly, "Yes." The mediator closed the folder. "We'll continue this mediation at a later date. I suggest both parties think carefully about what they're willing to compromise on, because if we can't reach an agreement, a judge will make these decisions for you. And judges, I'll tell you from experience, rarely make anyone happy." We left separately. Me with Denise, him with his expensive lawyer. In the parking garage, I leaned against Denise's car and tried to catch my breath. "That was good," she said. "That was really good." He admitted it on record. His lawyer is going to advise him to settle. Trust me. Why do I feel like I just got hit by a truck? Because this is hell. Divorce is always hell. But divorce from a manipulative narcissist is its own special circle. You did great in there. You stayed calm. You let me handle it. You didn't rise to his bait. There was bait. When he said he still loves you, that was bait. He wanted you to engage emotionally to show the mediator that you're the volatile one. You didn't bite. Good. I drove back to my sister's apartment in a daze. The kids were at school. My sister was at work. I had the place to myself for the first time in weeks. I walked into the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and barely recognized the woman looking back. Thinner, older, exhausted. When had that happened? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Please call me. I need to talk to you. It's important. His mother. I stared at the message for a full minute before responding. How did you get this number? From your father. Please, I need to see you. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a cafe the next morning. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a back table, looking small and nervous in a way I'd never seen her before. She'd always been this formidable presence at family gatherings, perfectly put together, commanding attention. Now she looked diminished. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not sure why I did. She flinched. I deserve that. I deserve worse than that. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, not drinking from it. I need to tell you something. I need to apologize. If this is about the Christmas party, it's about everything. All of it. The whole marriage. She looked up at me and her eyes were red. I knew. Not everything, but enough. I knew he had feelings for your sister when he started dating you. I saw how he looked at her at family events, how he maneuvered to be near her. I thought it was just a crush that would fade. That once you two were married, once there were children, he'd move past it. I felt cold. You knew. I suspected, and I did nothing. I said nothing because I wanted him to settle down, to have a family, and you seemed like such a nice girl. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But I wasn't, was I? No. My voice came out flat. You weren't. I'm sorry. She was crying now, quiet tears running down her face. I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I should have warned you or confronted him or something. Instead, I let it happen. I let him marry you while I had these doubts. And I justified it by thinking it would be good for him to have a stable relationship. I'm not a therapy session. I'm a person. I know God. I know. And I used you just as much as he did just by staying silent. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I just needed you to know that I see what he did. And I see my part in it. And I'm horrified. For what it's worth, I told him I can't have a relationship with him right now. Not until he gets serious help. We sat in silence for a moment. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to unleash all the anger and hurt I'd been carrying. But mostly I just felt tired. Thank you for telling me, I finally said. I don't know what to do with it, but thank you. The kids, she said. I'd still like to see them if that's okay. I know I don't have any right to ask, but they're my grandchildren and they didn't do anything wrong. They're not weapons. I'm not going to keep them from you because I'm angry at your son. You'd be justified if you did. Maybe, but that's not who I want to be. I stood up. I need to go. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you for meeting me, and please, if there's anything I can do to help, there isn't. I left her sitting there and drove back to my sister's place, feeling hollowed out. How many people had seen signs and said nothing? How many people had suspected but chose uncomfortable ignorance over difficult truth? The school called that afternoon. My son had been in another fight, this one bad enough that the other kids' parents were demanding a meeting. I picked him up from the principal's office, his eye already swelling, his shirt torn. The principal gave me this look that combined pity and judgment, and I wanted to scream that we were doing our best, that this wasn't normal for us, that my son was a good kid going through a terrible situation. Instead, I said, we'll talk to him at home. It won't happen again. In the car, my son stared out the window, arms crossed. Want to tell me what happened? I asked gently, he said. My parents are getting divorced because I'm a bad kid. My hands tightened on the wheel. That's not true. Not even a little bit true. I know. That's why I hit him. Hitting people isn't the answer. What is the answer? Good question. I was still trying to figure that out myself. Using your words, telling a teacher, not letting other people's ignorance turn you into something you're not. You hit Daddy with words, he said quietly. At that parking lot, I heard you. You used mean words. You're right. I did. And I'm sorry you heard that. Your dad and I are both hurting right now. And sometimes hurt people hurt other people. Even when they don't mean to. But that doesn't make it right. I don't want you to hurt. I know, baby. I don't want you to hurt either. But we're going to get through this. Okay? All of us. It's just going to take time. He didn't look convinced. I didn't blame him. I wasn't convinced either. That night, after the kids were asleep, my sister found me sitting on her balcony with a glass of wine, staring at the city lights. "How are you holding up?" she asked, sliding the door shut behind her. His mother knew or suspected, and she said nothing. My sister's expression hardened. Of course she did. Mothers know their sons. She probably saw exactly who he was and decided it was easier to pretend. She apologized. For what it's worth, it's not worth much. We sat in silence for a while, passing the wine back and forth. Finally, my sister spoke again. "I've been thinking about this whole thing, about him being obsessed with me, and I keep asking myself if I did something to encourage it, if I was too friendly or wore the wrong things or—" "Stop!" I grabbed her hand. "Don't do that to yourself. You were 16 when he met you. You were a kid. And even if you were older, even if you did smile at him or laugh at his jokes, that's not an invitation to build a fantasy relationship in his head. That's not permission to manipulate your sister into marriage as a consolation prize. None of this is your fault. It's not yours either. I know intellectually, I know. But there's this voice in my head asking why I wasn't enough. Why he couldn't just love me for who I am instead of wishing I was someone else. Because he's broken. Not you. Him. I wanted to believe that. I was trying to believe that. But 8 years of being measured against someone else had done damage that wasn't going to heal overnight. The apartment hunt intensified in the weeks that followed. I looked at dozens of places, all of them too expensive or too small or in the wrong neighborhood. My parents kept offering to help with more than just the deposit. But I was stubborn. I needed to do this myself to prove that I could stand on my own without depending on anyone. Pride is going to make you homeless, my sister observed after I turned down yet another offer of financial help. I need to know I can do this. Accepting help isn't weakness. It's human. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I accepted too much help, I'd just be trading one form of dependence for another. I needed to rebuild my life on my own terms with my own resources, even if that meant living in a shoebox apartment in a questionable neighborhood. The job hunt was equally brutal. I'd worked part-time during the marriage, fitting my hours around the kids' schedules, and now my resume looked like Swiss cheese with all the gaps. I sent out 23 applications in 1 week alone. I got callbacks from 4 companies. I went to interviews in clothes I'd borrowed from my sister because I'd left most of my professional wardrobe at the house and couldn't bring myself to go back for it. The 3rd interview was at a design firm downtown. Nothing glamorous, but steady work with benefits. The hiring manager was a woman in her 40s who looked at my resume and then looked at me. "You're overqualified for this position," she said bluntly. "But you've been out of full-time work for 6 years. Why should I take a chance on you?" I almost gave her the safe answer, the one about being ready to return to work now that my kids were older. But something made me tell the truth instead. "I'm getting divorced," I said. "My husband has been supporting us, and now I need to support myself and my kids. I'm reliable, I'm skilled, and I'm desperate in the way that makes people show up early and stay late. You won't find anyone more motivated than someone rebuilding their entire life from scratch." She hired me on the spot. Finally, I found an apartment that might work. A small 2-bedroom in an older building, close enough to the kids' school that they could walk if needed. It wasn't fancy, and the carpet had definitely seen better days. But it had good light, the landlord seemed decent, and the price was just barely manageable on my new salary. I signed the lease, sitting in my sister's car, my hand cramping as I wrote my name on form after form. Single applicant, single income, single mother. The day I moved in felt surreal. My parents helped, along with my sister and a couple of friends who'd stayed in touch through everything. We carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs, assembled furniture from the big box store, hung curtains that I'd picked out myself without consulting anyone else's opinion. The kids ran from room to room, excited about having their own space again, arguing over who got which side of the shared bedroom. "This is ours?" my daughter asked, spinning in the empty living room. "This is ours," I confirmed, and saying it out loud made it real. That first night in the new apartment, after the kids were asleep in their room and my helpers had all gone home, I sat on my second-hand couch and cried. Not sad tears exactly, more like release tears. Grief tears, relief tears, all mixed together. I was exhausted and scared and proud of myself all at once. My boss at the design firm was understanding about my situation, as understanding as any boss can be when you're asking for time off for mediation sessions and therapy appointments. But she was also clear about expectations. The flexibility came with the expectation that I'd deliver quality work on time. I threw myself into projects, grateful for something to focus on besides the dumpster fire my personal life had become. Something unexpected happened about a month after I started the new job. I got an email from someone I vaguely recognized, one of the women who'd been at that Christmas party. She worked in a different department from my ex-husband, and her message was short but direct. I was there that night. I heard what he said. "I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner, but I wanted you to know that most of us were appalled. Several people filed complaints with HR about his behavior. I don't know if that helps, but I thought you should know you weren't imagining how bad it was. You deserved better." I read the email 3 times before responding with a simple thank you. But it did help in a way I hadn't expected. Knowing that other people had witnessed it, had been disturbed by it, had taken action, made me feel less alone in my anger. I wasn't being oversensitive. I wasn't overreacting. What he did was objectively awful, and people who barely knew me could see that. 2 more emails came in the following days, similar sentiments from other coworkers. One woman admitted she'd always found him off in the way he talked about his family. Another said she'd warned HR years ago about comments he'd made that seemed inappropriate, but couldn't quite pin down why. I forwarded all of them to Denise, who added them to our growing file of evidence. The kids adjusted to our new apartment better than I'd expected. They decorated their shared room with posters and stuffed animals, divided it down the middle with a strip of painter's tape into mine and your spaces. They helped me assemble furniture from the big box store, wielding Allen wrenches like swords and making a game out of finding the right screws. On our first night in the new place, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor because I hadn't bought a dining table yet. My daughter asked if Daddy could come see our new home, and I had to explain that this was just our space, that Daddy had his own space, and that was okay. "But I miss when we all lived together," she said, and my heart broke into smaller pieces than I thought possible. "I know, sweetheart. I miss parts of that, too. But sometimes families look different than they used to, and that doesn't mean there's less love. It's just love that lives in different places now." She seemed to accept this, or at least stopped asking questions. My son was quieter, more withdrawn, but the school counselor said that was normal for kids processing divorce. I started developing routines that were just ours. Saturday morning pancakes at the kitchen counter. Wednesday evenings at the library picking out new books. Sunday afternoons at the park where the kids could run and scream and be loud in ways they couldn't in our small apartment. These rituals became anchors, things we could count on when everything else felt uncertain. One afternoon, about 2 months into living on our own, my son came home from school with a picture he'd drawn in art class. It showed 3 stick figures in front of a building, all smiling. "That's us at our new home," he explained. "I told my teacher we moved, and she said I should draw our family." "Where's Daddy?" I asked carefully. "He's at his house. This is our house." He said it so matter-of-factly, without sadness or confusion, just stating a simple truth. They were adapting, creating a new normal, accepting that life could be different and still be okay. I taped the drawing to the refrigerator where I could see it every morning. A reminder that we were building something new, that endings could also be beginnings. The custody exchanges became routine over the following months, though they never quite became comfortable. Every other Friday at 6, we'd meet in that same coffee shop parking lot. He was always exactly on time, always asked politely how I was doing, always brought the kids back clean and fed and on schedule. It was painfully civil, this choreographed dance we performed for the sake of our children. But there was one exchange that stood out from all the others. About 4 months into our new normal, he pulled up and the kids ran to him like always. But when they were buckled in and he was walking back to his driver's side, he stopped. "Can I ask you something?" he called out. I tensed but nodded. "Are they okay? Really okay?" My son's teacher said he's been struggling with math, and my daughter told me she had a nightmare about monsters. "Are they talking to someone?" It was the most genuine concern I'd heard in his voice since the night everything fell apart. Not about himself, not about us, just about them. "The school counselor sees them both once a week," I said. "They're working through it. I hate that they have to be." He looked away, jaw tight. "I hate that I did this to them." "Then be a good father now. That's all you can do." He nodded and got in his car. And I stood there for a moment feeling something I hadn't felt toward him in months. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe a recognition that people are complicated, that someone can cause tremendous harm and still be capable of growth. His mother started attending some of the exchanges, presumably to see the grandkids. I was civil to her because the kids loved her, but I couldn't quite make myself warm up. Some betrayals cut too deep for politeness to paper over. Months passed. Summer turned to fall, fall to winter. I started to notice things getting easier. Day by day, I stopped expecting to feel happy again and just focused on getting through each day without crying. That felt like progress. Then one day, my sister invited me to a work event. One of those networking things she was always going to. I almost said no. Too tired, too busy, too not ready for socializing. But she insisted. "You need to be around people who aren't family or lawyers," she said firmly. "You need to remember that there's a world outside this divorce." So I went. I wore a nice dress that I'd bought for myself, not because someone else picked it out. I did my hair. I even put on makeup, which I'd barely bothered with in months. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who looked put together, almost confident. It was startling. The event was at some upscale venue downtown. All exposed brick and craft cocktails and people in business casual, talking about projects and deadlines and normal things. My sister introduced me to some of her colleagues, and I forced myself to make conversation, to smile, to pretend I was a functioning human being. And then something weird happened. I stopped pretending. I was talking to someone about design work, and they were genuinely interested in my opinions, asking follow-up questions, listening to my answers. They didn't know about my divorce or my situation. They just saw me as a person with ideas and skills and something valuable to contribute. Someone asked for my card. I gave it to them, feeling like an imposter, but also feeling something else. Seen, valued, not as someone's wife or someone's ex or someone's sister, just as myself. On the drive home, my sister asked how it went. "Good," I said, surprised to realize I meant it. It was actually good. See, the world didn't end. No, I guess it didn't. The final divorce papers came through in early spring. Denise called to tell me it was done, and I remember standing in my little apartment kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, feeling nothing. Just this strange absence of feeling, like I'd braced for an impact that never came. "You did it," Denise said. "It's over. What now?" "Now you live your life. Now you figure out what you want instead of reacting to what he did. Now you get to just be." I thanked her, hung up, and sat down on my second-hand couch. The kids were at school. The apartment was quiet. Sunlight was streaming through the windows I'd cleaned the day before. And I was officially, legally single. I called my sister. "It's done. The divorce is final. How do you feel?" "I don't know. Empty, relieved, sad. All of it at once." "That sounds about right. Want me to come over?" "No. I think I need to sit with this for a bit. But thanks." I sat there for a long time after we hung up, just letting myself feel whatever came up. Grief for the life I'd thought I had. Relief that the constant tension was over. Fear about the future. Hope, small and tentative, that maybe I could build something better now. My therapist had been working with me on recognizing my own patterns, the ways I'd made myself smaller to fit into what I thought my husband wanted. How I'd stopped pursuing hobbies because he'd made subtle comments about them being impractical or silly. How I'd changed my appearance, my interests, my entire personality to try to be lovable, never realizing that I'd been lovable all along. Just not to someone who'd already decided he wanted something else. You spent 8 years trying to be enough for someone who'd made you inadequate before you even met, Miriam said during one session. That was never a game you could win. The problem wasn't you. It was that he was measuring you against an impossible standard, being someone you aren't. How do I stop doing that? How do I stop measuring myself against my sister? Do you want to be your sister? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No. I love her, but I don't want to be her. I want to be me. Then start acting like you believe that's enough. Easier said than done. But I was trying. I'd started taking a pottery class on Tuesday evenings, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I was reading books my husband had mocked as beach reads, and thoroughly enjoying them. I was learning that I liked my coffee black, not with cream and sugar like I'd been drinking it for years because that's how he'd prepared it. Small things, tiny rebellions against the person I'd been trained to be. But they added up. My parents threw a celebration of independence dinner a few weeks after the divorce was finalized. It felt weird to celebrate the end of a marriage, but my dad insisted. You're celebrating freedom, he said, raising his glass. You're celebrating choosing yourself. You're celebrating survival. Those are all worth commemorating. My kids played with my nieces and nephews in the backyard, their laughter drifting through the open windows. My sister made a toast about resilience and starting over. My mom hugged me tight and whispered that she was proud of me. Even his mother had started to rebuild some connection with us, carefully and respectfully. She saw the kids every few weeks, always at neutral locations, always respecting my boundaries. She never asked about him, and I never offered information. But I could see in her eyes every time she looked at me that she was carrying her own guilt about what her silence had cost. Thank you for letting me be part of their lives, she'd said the last time I'd seen her, her voice thick with emotion. I know I don't deserve it. They deserve to know their grandmother, I'd replied. That's not about you or me. It's about them. Standing there at my parents' house, surrounded by people who loved me for exactly who I was, I realized something Miriam had told me weeks earlier was finally sinking in. Healing isn't about forgetting what happened, she'd said during one of our last sessions before I'd graduated to monthly check-ins. It's about integrating it into your story without letting it define you. You're not just the woman whose husband betrayed her. You're the woman who survived that betrayal and built something new. I was becoming okay. Not every day, but more days than not. The kids proved everyone right about resilience. They stopped asking when we were going back to the old house. They started calling my apartment home without any qualifiers. They developed their own routines in both places. Adapted to having 2 birthday parties and 2 Christmas mornings and 2 bedrooms. My daughter started taking art classes on Saturdays, something she'd always wanted to do, but we'd never made time for before. She'd come home with paintings of flowers and houses and abstract swirls of color, taping them proudly to the walls of our apartment. My son joined a coding club at school and came home every week excited to show me what he'd learned. Pulling up programs he'd written on my laptop, eyes bright with accomplishment. They were building their own lives, their own interests, separate from the trauma that had brought us to this point. Watching them thrive gave me permission to try thriving too. And slowly, carefully, I was not just surviving anymore, but actually living. I'd started taking that pottery class on Tuesday evenings, my hands covered in clay, creating things that were imperfect and beautiful precisely because of their flaws. The instructor praised my progress, said I had good instincts. It felt strange to be praised for something that had nothing to do with being someone's wife or someone's mother, to be seen just as myself. I was reading books I wanted to read, not books someone else thought I should read. I was learning that I liked my coffee black, that I preferred mornings to evenings, that I was actually good at my job when I wasn't constantly second-guessing myself. I discovered I liked going to movies alone, that eating dinner at 9 p.m. because I got distracted working felt freeing rather than wrong, that I could make decisions about my own life without consulting anyone. Small things, tiny rebellions against the person I'd been trained to be, but they added up to someone I was starting to recognize and even like. I ran into my ex at a coffee shop one Saturday morning. I was there with a book, enjoying the rare luxury of time to myself while the kids were at his place. He was there with a date, some woman I didn't recognize, and they were laughing about something when he looked up and saw me. His face went through about 5 different expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, guilt, defensiveness, something that might have been longing, and finally resignation. I gave him a small nod of acknowledgement and went back to my book. His date said something to him, and they left a few minutes later. I didn't feel jealous. I didn't feel much of anything, actually, except maybe a mild curiosity about whether he'd tell her the truth about why his first marriage ended. But it wasn't my problem anymore. None of it was my problem anymore. That night, putting the kids to bed after they came back from his place, my son asked me a question. "Mom, are you happy now?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. Not the automatic yes, of course I might have given before, but an honest assessment. "Yeah," I said, surprised to realize it was true. "Yeah, I think I am. Not all the time and not in the way I expected to be. But yeah, I'm happy." "Good." He hugged me tight. "You're my number one choice." I held him close, tears pricking my eyes, and realized this was what being loved actually felt like. Not being measured against someone else. Not being accepted as a consolation. Just being valued fully and completely for exactly who I was. Later that night, after both kids were asleep, I stood in my small apartment and looked around. The furniture was secondhand. The carpet was old. The walls needed painting. But it was mine. I'd chosen it, paid for it, made it into a home. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, standing at that Christmas party, hearing those words that shattered my world. I thought about the woman I'd been for 8 years before that, trying so hard to be enough, never understanding why I always fell short. And I thought about the woman I was becoming. Someone who knew her own worth, who didn't need anyone else's validation, who could look in the mirror and like the person looking back. It had taken the worst betrayal of my life to get here. It had taken months of therapy and tears and late-night anxiety attacks. It had taken confronting some hard truths about the person I'd been and the person I wanted to become. But standing there in my small apartment, listening to my kids breathe in their room, feeling the quiet satisfaction of being alone without being lonely, I realized something important. I wasn't the second choice anymore. I was my own first choice, and that was enough. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My wife gave our son a different name on the birth certificate. Her ex's. When I confronted her, she said, "Yeah, he's not even yours. What are you going to do? Divorce me? This is a no-fault state. I'm taking half." Loser. I didn't say a word. I just got a DNA test, hired a lawyer, and started packing. 3 months later, she was outside my building sobbing, homeless, and begging me, too. I am still processing how one piece of paper changed everything. It's been just 5 days since my son was born. My wife, Vanessa, 31F, was discharged yesterday, and I was sorting through the paperwork from the hospital. Birth certificate, insurance forms, the usual. That's when I saw it. The name on the birth certificate, not James Taylor like we'd agreed. Instead, Alexander Reynolds Taylor. Alexander. The name hit me like a truck. That was her ex's name, Vanessa. "What's this?" I asked, walking into the bedroom where she was resting with the baby. "The birth certificate says Alexander, not James." She glanced up, then looked back at her phone. "Oh yeah. Last-minute change of heart. Alexander sounds better." "Alexander like your ex?" Something shifted in her face. A cold calculation replaced the exhaustion of new motherhood. "Surprised you caught that so quickly," she said with a small, ugly laugh. "Why would you name our son after your ex?" "Because he's not our son, Mark. He's Alex's son." The room seemed to tilt. "What? You heard me. The baby isn't yours. Alex and I have been seeing each other for about a year." I stared at her, blood rushing in my ears. "What are you going to do about it? Divorce me?" She laughed coldly. "This is a no-fault state. I get half of everything either way. The house, your savings, plus child support." She turned back to her phone. "Stay and play, Daddy, or leave and pay. Either way, I win." I didn't say a word, didn't scream, didn't throw things. Just turned around and walked out of the room. My first call was to a DNA testing facility. They could see me tomorrow. Second call was to a law firm specializing in divorce cases. The receptionist heard the urgency in my voice and squeezed me in for a consultation the same afternoon. Jessica Winters was exactly what I needed. Experienced, direct, and strategically minded. No-fault divorce doesn't mean what your wife thinks it means, she explained after hearing my situation. It just means you don't need to prove wrongdoing to get divorced. It doesn't guarantee her half your assets, especially with evidence of fraud. Fraud. Paternity fraud. Putting you on the birth certificate of another man's child. Knowingly, that's fraud. Her admission about taking half your assets shows intent. We can work with that. Jessica outlined a plan. Get the DNA test. Gather financial records, especially proof of assets I had before marriage. Secure valuables and irreplaceable items. Find new housing. Most importantly, don't tip your hand. Let her think she's winning, Jessica advised. The more complacent she is, the better. 3 days later, the DNA test confirmed what I already knew. The baby wasn't mine. I spent the next week securing my most important documents and possessions in a storage unit, researching apartments, and meticulously documenting our finances. Our home was mostly purchased with money from my software business that had sold before we married. Jessica confirmed this would be critical. She advised, urging me to gather all documentation showing the source of the down payment and mortgage payments. 1 week later, while Vanessa was at her postnatal checkup with her mother, I executed the plan. The movers arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, efficiently packing my pre-marriage furniture and personal belongings. By 11 o'clock, they were gone. I had my name removed from all utilities, left the divorce papers on the dining table with a note, all communication through my attorney, and drove to my new apartment. The sense of calm was surreal. Not the reaction she expected, I'm sure. 72 hours later. Well, it's been a ride. Thanks for the comments and DMs. Good to know I'm not completely off my rocker for reacting the way I did. 72 hours refers to when I'm writing this. The main confrontation happened Wednesday afternoon, same day as the birth certificate discovery. Vanessa returned home from her appointment around 2 p.m. According to our neighbor Ted, who texted me, there was a lot of screaming about 15 minutes later. Then the barrage began. 21 missed calls, 31 texts, all blocked. I read a few before blocking her. What the hell did you do? You can't just leave like this. This isn't how we're supposed to handle this. You were supposed to stay and support us or pay from afar, not fight. You'll regret this. She started emailing, too. Those got filtered to a special folder Jessica advised I create. Don't delete anything. Don't respond. Document everything. The panic in her messages was clear. She hadn't expected me to discover the paternity so quickly, hadn't expected me to leave immediately, and definitely hadn't expected me to fight back. Legally, her plan was falling apart because I wasn't following the script she had written for me. By evening, she'd called in reinforcements. Her mother called, also blocked, but she left voicemails. Mark, this is Sandra. Vanessa is distraught. You need to come home right now and discuss this like adults. This isn't how things are supposed to go. You have responsibilities. Responsibilities to a child that isn't mine. To a woman who deliberately deceived me. The sheer audacity. Vanessa must have realized I was serious by day 2. She finally contacted Jessica first with threats. Tell your client this isn't what we discussed. He can leave if he wants, but he needs to keep supporting us. Otherwise, I'll take him for everything. Jessica's response was perfect. My client never discussed any arrangement regarding a child that isn't his. We have DNA confirmation and documentation of your admission of paternity fraud. We'll see you at the preliminary hearing. That changed the tone quickly. By yesterday, Vanessa was begging to know where I was staying, claiming she just needs to talk. When that didn't work, she sent her sister Diane to my office. Diane cornered me in the parking lot. Mark, you need to go home. Vanessa made a mistake. A horrible mistake. But this isn't how things were supposed to go. You were supposed to leave amicably and support them, not fight her legally. Not my child, Diane. Not my problem. I said, finally understanding the full picture. That doesn't matter, she told me. She told you she'd let you off the hook for actual fatherhood duties. She just needs your financial support. She can't do this alone. So that was the plan. I either stay and raise another man's child or I leave but still pay for everything. Then why even tell me the truth? Because she thought you'd be reasonable. She thought you'd understand the situation and do the right thing. The right thing being continuing to fund her lifestyle while she raised her lover's child. The entitlement was staggering. Please leave before I call security, I said. You cold bastard, she spat. After everything Vanessa's done for you, done for me, like cheat for a year and try to pass off another man's child as mine. Jessica filed for an expedited hearing based on the paternity fraud, though she warned it could still take 6 to 8 weeks to get on the court calendar. We're pushing for Vanessa to cover all legal fees due to her demonstrated bad faith. The kicker came this morning. A text from an unknown number, but obviously Vanessa using someone else's phone. Alex wants nothing to do with us. He blocked me. You can't just abandon us like this. We need you. Her backup plan failed. And now she's desperate. I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. 6 weeks later, the preliminary hearing finally happened last week. The court system moves at its own pace, even with expedited requests. Vanessa showed up looking exhausted with the baby in a carrier. An obvious play for sympathy that the judge completely ignored. Her attorney seemed unprepared for the evidence. Jessica, the DNA test, documentation of Vanessa's admission, and a financial breakdown showing that 80% of our house was purchased with my pre-marriage assets. The judge wasn't impressed with Vanessa, especially after Jessica played a voicemail Vanessa had left for my brother, not knowing we weren't close. Tell Mark he's making a huge mistake. I'll drag this out until his lawyer bills bankrupt him. He'll regret this. That's when the judge ordered a freeze on marital assets and scheduled an expedited final hearing in 45 days. He also ordered Vanessa to provide a complete accounting of all spending since our separation and to vacate my home office where I had equipment for my consulting business. While this is a no-fault state, the judge stated, the court does not look kindly on attempts to manipulate the legal system through fraud or bad faith actions. Outside the courtroom, Vanessa tried to approach me, baby in arms. Mark, please. You know me. We can work through this. I just kept walking. All communication through counsel, Jessica reminded her. You'll regret this, Vanessa called after us. This isn't just about you and me. This is a child. A child whose actual father you should be contacting, Jessica replied without breaking stride. Over the next week, things escalated. Vanessa was ordered to return my work equipment, but claimed some of it had been damaged in an accident. She also emptied our joint checking account, $3,800, which Jessica immediately reported to the court as a violation of the asset freeze. The judge ordered her to repay it or face contempt charges. Then last week, she somehow got my new address, likely through a mutual friend who thought they were helping, and showed up pounding on the door, baby crying in her arms. Open the door, Mark. You can't hide from your responsibilities. We need to talk. I didn't open the door, just called building security. While recording her through the peephole, Jessica filed for a protective order based on harassment. With the recording, police report from the security team, and documented pattern of escalating behavior, the judge granted a temporary order pending a full hearing. Meanwhile, I've been rebuilding, reconnected with friends Vanessa had subtly pushed away, sleeping better than I have in months. There's a strange liberation in seeing someone's true nature so clearly. Update 3. For months later, the legal process dragged on longer than I'd hoped, but we finally had our day in court. The judge, clearly irritated by Vanessa's continued games, missed financial disclosure deadlines, lost documents, and another attempt to contact me despite the protective order, was thorough in his review. It was over in less than 3 hours. The outcome, house to be sold with 80% of proceeds to me, reflecting my larger initial contribution and documentation of premarital funds. My retirement accounts remained solely mine. All property purchased before marriage returned to original owner. Vanessa ordered to pay $8,000 of my legal fees due to her pattern of bad faith actions, about half of my total costs. I was legally established as not being the father with no support obligations. The court ordered the birth certificate to be amended. Vanessa broke down when the judge ruled on the paternity matter. But Your Honor, he's the only father this child has. Alexander won't. The judge also recommended Vanessa pursue a paternity action against Alexander through the family court, noting that the child had a right to support from his biological father, regardless of Alexander's marital situation. Your personal arrangement with Mr. Reynolds is not the court's concern, the judge told her. The child has rights independent of your relationship status. The house sold within 3 weeks in a hot market. I kept my job, my savings, and most of my sanity. Through mutual friends, I heard Vanessa had to move in with her parents in a small town 50 miles away, making her sales territory impossible to cover. She eventually took a much lower-paying retail job closer to them. The entitlement is still there, though. Last week, she emailed, "Mark got everything he wanted. The least he could do is help me with a down payment on a condo. After 4 years of marriage, I deserve something." Jessica's response: "The court has made its determination. Please refer to the restraining order conditions before attempting further contact." Final update. 6 months later. Life has a strange way of coming full circle. Yesterday, I was walking out of my building to meet a friend for dinner when I saw her. Vanessa sitting on a bench across the street, the baby in a stroller beside her. When she saw me, she stood up, hesitating before crossing over. She looked different, thinner, hair pulled back, simply wearing jeans and a plain sweater instead of her usual designer clothes. "Please," she said as I stopped. "Just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I nodded. "I lost my job last month," she said without preamble. "My parents are selling their house, moving to Florida. I can't. I don't have anywhere to go." I said nothing, just waited. Alex still won't acknowledge the baby. Won't even take a DNA test. Says his wife would leave him. Her voice cracked. "I've applied for emergency housing, but there's a waiting list. I'm sleeping in my car some nights. What do you want from me, Vanessa?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Help. Alone. Maybe you know someone who needs an assistant or has a room to rent. I'm not asking to come back. I know that's impossible." But Alexander stirred in the stroller and she automatically rocked it, soothing him. There was a time when this would have torn me apart, but I felt surprisingly calm, almost detached. "Vanessa, you entitled piece of shit," I said as I walked away. The revenge wasn't in the legal victory or keeping my assets. The real revenge was in this moment, being able to stand before the woman who had tried to destroy me, who had laughed at the idea of me fighting back, and feel nothing but calm detachment. She had expected me to be a doormat, to either accept her betrayal or pay for her new life. Instead, I had quietly, methodically dismantled her plans and rebuilt my life on my terms. I had proven her wrong in the most fundamental way. I wasn't a loser. I was a man who knew his worth and refused to be manipulated. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Sometimes the best revenge isn't some elaborate scheme. It's simply refusing to be a victim and letting the natural consequences play out. The life she tried to steal from me is gone. The life I've built in its place is all mine. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My name's Mark. I'm 33. I proposed to my fiancée, Haley, last spring on the pier where we had our first date. We'd been together for almost 5 years, and she'd stood by me through some brutal chapters. Job loss, family chaos, health scares. She was my safe place. So when she said yes, I felt like everything had finally clicked into place. We planned a small, elegant ceremony at a vineyard about 40 minutes outside the city. Haley's family was supportive, sweet, and involved, but not overbearing. Mine, on the other hand, well, let's just say subtlety and grace were never in their vocabulary. The first crack in the wall came barely a month after we sent out save the dates. I got a call from my mom, her voice tight and passive-aggressive in that way only she had perfected. "Sweetheart," she said, drawing the word out like she was already exhausted by whatever came next. "Do you really think a wedding in May is the best idea?" I paused. "Why wouldn't it be? There was a beat of silence before she sighed. The kind of sigh that let me know I was about to be guilt-tripped into something absurd. It's just that, well, your brother's graduation is in early June, and you know how sensitive he is about people stealing his thunder. My brother, Tyler, is 25. The golden boy, the one who somehow turned being average at everything into a full-blown identity people were expected to applaud. He changed college majors 5 times, failed out of 2 different universities, and finally earned a degree in communications and lifestyle branding from a school I had to Google to confirm was real. Despite all that, my parents still acted like he was the next Steve Jobs. Every family dinner revolved around Tyler's latest minor achievement. Ty got a job interview today. Ty's starting a podcast. Ty's moving back to focus on his mental clarity. And now, apparently, my wedding was a threat to his moment. I tried to be diplomatic. Mom, the wedding's been planned for months. And it's not like we scheduled it during his graduation. It's literally 4 weeks earlier. But that didn't matter. She gently, then not so gently, suggested we push the date back to July. It would just show that you care about your brother's feelings, she said. He's been working so hard. I bit my tongue. Working hard? Tyler hadn't held a job longer than 6 months. Meanwhile, Haley and I were budgeting every dime, working overtime, juggling venue bookings, family schedules, and a mortgage. But sure, let's cancel everything for the fragile ego of the guy who once cried because our cousin beat him in Mario Kart. I told her we weren't moving the date. That's when the cold front truly set in. Calls dropped from daily to once a week. My dad didn't return my texts. My younger cousin, who I'd always been close with, suddenly said she couldn't be a bridesmaid because things were weird with the family. And then came the dinner. It was supposed to be a calm Sunday meal at my parents' house, a tradition that had limped along since I moved out. Haley and I showed up with a bottle of wine and polite smiles. Tyler was already there, lounging on the couch like he owned the place, wearing sunglasses indoors and scrolling through TikTok like he was allergic to eye contact. My mom ushered us into the kitchen and immediately started in with a syrupy tone. Mark, honey, your father and I were talking, and we think it might just be better for everyone if you postpone the wedding until next year. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Ty's really been struggling lately, she continued. He needs support right now, not a big distraction. And your wedding? It's a lot. A lot of what? I asked, still trying to keep my voice level. A lot of attention. My dad cut in, suddenly appearing in the doorway. Look, son, you've had your moments. Now it's your brother's turn. Be a team player. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were seriously asking me to cancel the most important day of my life. Not just reschedule, but cancel because my brother was apparently too emotionally fragile to exist in a world where something wasn't about him. Haley squeezed my hand under the table. I glanced at her, and she didn't need to say anything. Her eyes said everything. She was tired of trying to be gracious to people who saw her as an inconvenience, tired of bending herself into a smile while being treated like an outsider. That night, we sat in our car for a long time after we left their house. I stared at the dashboard. My fingers gripped the steering wheel, white-knuckled. Are we really going to do this? I asked. No, Haley said quietly. You don't deserve that. We don't deserve that. And just like that, the idea began to take root. Not canceling our wedding, canceling them. Not in some dramatic, scream-filled fight, but quietly, surgically. If they wanted to make this a war over attention, fine. But I was done playing the loyal son while being treated like a supporting character in Tyler's ego parade. The next day, I started making calls. Not to change the date, but to change the guest list. I called the venue and asked how we could adjust for a smaller group. I emailed our caterer. I took a long walk with Haley, and we went through the guest list with a highlighter and a bottle of wine, crossing off names like we were performing a long-overdue exorcism. When the new invites went out, my phone lit up like a slot machine. Texts, calls, passive-aggressive emails. My mom sent a 5-paragraph message titled, Deeply Hurt, that began with, I hope you're proud of what you've done to this family, and ended with, your brother is in tears. I didn't reply. Then came the message from Tyler. I can't believe you would do this to me, he wrote. You've always been jealous, but this is a new low. Don't expect me to show up when your life falls apart. I showed the text to Haley. She didn't laugh. She just nodded and said, "Good. Let them be exactly who they are." But the real meltdown, the one that made it all worth it, came a few days later, and it happened in a way I didn't expect. It was a Wednesday. I'd just gotten home from work and was halfway through making dinner when I heard pounding on the front door. Not knocking, full-on pounding, like someone was trying to break in with their fists. Haley looked up from the couch, eyes wide. I opened the door, and there stood my mother, Dad right behind her, and Tyler sulking in the car, parked crooked across our driveway like he couldn't even be bothered to pretend he wasn't sulking. "Mark," my mother snapped, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "What is wrong with you?" I shut the door slowly, turning to face them. "Good evening to you, too. Don't play games," she spat. "Your father and I just found out from your Aunt Debbie's Facebook that the invitations were updated. You uninvited your own family." Haley stood now, arms crossed, silent but alert behind me. I kept my tone calm. "Yes, I did." She blinked. "You what?" "I uninvited the people who made it clear they don't support our relationship, our wedding, or our choices. That includes the people who told me to cancel my wedding so my brother could feel special about graduating college 7 years late." My dad stepped forward, shoulders tense. "You're being childish." "No," I said. "I was being childish every time I let you guilt me into sacrificing for Tyler. Every time I let you ignore Haley. Every time I let you rewrite family events to fit his ego. I'm 33 years old, and this is the first time in my life I've made a boundary with you. And look how fast you came running to smash it." That shut them up for a second. Then my mom laughed. Actually laughed. "So this is her?" she sneered, gesturing to Haley. "This is the influence. I knew it. I knew she was turning you against us. You used to be such a good son." "I used to be a doormat," I said. "Not anymore. You owe this family," my dad growled. "We put you through school." "No," I said, sharper now. "You took out a loan and reminded me every year that I was lucky you didn't make me pay it back. Meanwhile, I paid Tyler's credit card bill 3 times without a thank you. I helped cover your mortgage when Dad was out of work. I co-signed that lease for your second car. Do you remember any of that?" They stared at me blank-faced. "I do," I said. "So, if we're talking about debts, yours are overdue." That's when Tyler finally got out of the car. He stormed up the driveway, arms waving like some minor celebrity denied entry to a nightclub. "This is all because of your ego," he shouted. "You think you're better than me? I think I don't have to prove anything to you anymore," I said. "Everyone says you're selfish," he snapped. "Mom and Dad are ashamed." "Great," I said. "Then I guess we finally agree on something. You should all go." My mom gasped like I just struck her. "You're kicking us out." "No," I said. "I'm asking you to leave. You'll know if you're ever actually kicked out. There's still a difference for now." They didn't move. I added, "I'm not going to stand here and argue. We're done. We've made our decision. If you want to be part of our lives, it won't be on your terms anymore." Haley stepped forward now, her voice calm and firm. "You're not the victims here, but you can choose to stop being villains." That was the final straw. My mom turned red, mouth twitching, eyes glossy with angry tears. She whirled around and marched back to the car. My dad followed, muttering something about ungratefulness. Tyler lingered for a moment. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "Maybe," I said, "but not today." Then he left. The silence afterward was deafening and beautiful. Haley exhaled slowly and wrapped her arms around me. "I'm sorry it had to happen like that," she said. "I'm not," I replied. "I'm just sorry it took me this long." But of course that wasn't the end. 3 days later, the emails began. Not from my parents, but from extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Some were polite, others furious. A few offered constructive criticism that was really just veiled insults about my emotional immaturity or wedding entitlement. One cousin I hadn't spoken to in years told me that family is about forgiveness, not cancellation. Another sent me a Bible quote. Cute, Then came the real kicker. My mother posted a cryptic status online. It read, "Sometimes the children you raise turn into strangers. We'll be attending a graduation instead of a wedding this year. Pray for our broken hearts." It was followed by a crying emoji and a family photo from 10 years ago, me included, like I was some long-lost soul. The comments rolled in. I saw people I grew up with, church friends, neighbors, family friends, all chiming in with condolences, outrage, sympathy. "You were the best parents. Some kids just forget who raised them. Prayers for healing, blah, blah, blah." I didn't comment. I didn't even screenshot it. I just blocked her. And then something unexpected happened. Haley's mom forwarded me a text. Apparently, my dad had reached out to her behind my back, asking if there was any way to talk sense into Mark, and if they still had time to fix this before he destroys the family. She replied with one sentence. "He's not destroying anything. He's finally rebuilding." But the real turning point, the moment I knew I was past the point of no return, was when I got a call from the vineyard. Apparently, someone had called and tried to impersonate me, saying the wedding was canceled and asking for a full refund. They gave my mother's name. I stood there, phone in hand, in stunned silence. I should have been angry, and I was, but more than anything, I felt a strange kind of peace. Like a fog had finally lifted. They weren't going to stop. Not because they cared, but because they couldn't stand the idea of losing control. I called the venue back. I confirmed everything was still on. Then I called my lawyer. The lawyer's name was Dana Chin. Sharp, pragmatic, and no nonsense. The kind of person who didn't blink when I told her the full story. I'd met her once through a friend during a work dispute, and even then, she'd left an impression. When I explained everything, the pressure, the harassment, the impersonation attempt with the venue, she didn't flinch. "They impersonated you over the phone?" she asked, fingers flying across her keyboard. "Yeah," I said. The venue flagged it because the caller didn't know the deposit amount or Haley's last name. They asked weird questions, too, like if the guest list had changed. Someone was fishing for info. Dana looked up. "That's not just petty family drama. That's fraud. If they tried to cancel a legally binding contract in your name, you could have been out thousands." "Can we do anything?" I asked. She smirked. "Oh, we can do a lot. That's how the cease and desist letters were born. Not out of anger, not really. They were a shield, legal, cold, and final. One letter to each of them, my parents, Tyler, and the 2 aunts who'd been most vocal online. The message was clear. Stop interfering or face consequences. Dana made sure it was airtight. Impersonation, harassment, defamation. She even included a polite but firm reminder that any further tampering with our wedding would be documented. Haley and I mailed them out together, hand-delivered at the post office. There was a strange sense of closure in dropping those envelopes in the slot, like saying, "You wanted a reaction? This is it." But the quiet didn't last. It never does with people like that. About a week later, my cousin Ellie, one of the few sane members of the family, sent me a voice note. "Hey Mark, just a heads up, your mom was crying at church today. Said you'd gone full legal on the family and were threatening lawsuits. People were trying to comfort her. But she kept saying you were being manipulated and she was scared you'd never speak to them again. Oh, and she said the wedding might not be real, that it's all a stunt to hurt Tyler." I didn't even know how to respond to that. "What?" Haley asked, staring at me. "That the wedding might not be real." Haley raised an eyebrow. "So what? I'm fake now." I sighed. "Apparently, you're an illusion created to traumatize my family." She snorted. "Well, I am quite dramatic. Maybe I should wear a red gown and arrive in a cloud of smoke. It would have been funny if it didn't sting so much." They were rewriting the narrative in real time, warping facts until they could see themselves as victims. I could practically hear my mom's voice in my head, explaining to a room full of sympathetic neighbors how her son had gone off the deep end and was under the influence of a woman who never really fit into the family. What they didn't know was that every time they said something like that, every time they played the martyr or twisted the truth, they were giving me more fuel. And then came the voicemail. I hadn't spoken to my father since the doorstep argument. He'd been quiet, eerily so. But 2 weeks after the cease and desist, his number popped up on my phone. I didn't answer. He left a message. Mark, look, I don't agree with how your mother's been handling things or your brother, but you've escalated this into something ugly. Lawyers, legal threats, you know that's not how family handles things. If you go through with this wedding without us there, you're cutting ties. You understand that, right? There won't be a way back. There it was. The unspoken threat made spoken. I replayed it 3 times. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to remember the tone. That tight, controlled disappointment, the same voice he'd used when I told him I wanted to be a writer instead of joining his accounting firm, when I didn't attend Tyler's 3rd graduation ceremony because I had surgery, when I said no to co-signing a second loan for Tyler's branding agency. He thought this was just another phase I'd apologize for later. It wasn't. A week out from the wedding, Haley and I had final fittings for our outfits. Her dress was stunning, simple, elegant, not flashy. She didn't cry when she saw herself in it. She didn't gasp or get breathless like they show in movies. She just smiled, small and certain, and said, "Yeah, this is the one." That night, while we ate takeout on the floor of our half-furnished living room, I checked my email. One unread message. Subject, "From your brother, a final attempt." Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was longer than I expected. No insults, no yelling, just a paragraph that read, "I don't know what's happening to you. I don't get why you'd throw away everything over a wedding. But I talked to Mom and Dad and they're saying they're not coming. I think that's wrong. You shouldn't have to choose. If you want, I'll talk to them. Just let me come. Just don't shut me out, too." It should have felt like a peace offering, but something about it felt off. Too clean. Too rehearsed. Like he wrote it after someone told him to try one last time. Haley leaned over my shoulder as I reread it. "He didn't apologize," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "He didn't." And then, like clockwork, came the second email. This one wasn't from Tyler. It was from the Vineyard. Subject, "Urgent unauthorized guest list access attempt." Apparently, someone called again, this time asking to add people back onto the guest list using my name. They'd asked about table placements, if the original head table seating with family could be restored, and even mentioned special dietary restrictions for the groom's mother. They'd used Tyler's phone number. I closed my laptop and sat in stunned silence for a moment until Haley broke it with a quiet, "They still think they can sneak their way back in." "No," I said, standing. "They think this is a negotiation." I picked up my phone and I called Dana. Dana didn't hesitate. After I explained everything, the latest impersonation attempt, the cryptic emails, the voicemail from my father, she asked for a timeline, receipts, and screenshots. Within hours, she sent over a formal warning addressed to Tyler, advising him that any further interference would result in legal action for identity misrepresentation and attempted contract manipulation. She also attached a list of rights Haley and I had as clients of the venue, including the right to press charges if someone attempted to impersonate us again. By now, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. Just done. Fully, finally done. They'd shown me who they were at every turn. The desperation, the manipulation, the lack of basic decency. But more than that, the assumption that I would always bend, always fold, always apologize for making them uncomfortable with my boundaries. They didn't realize they'd broken the last piece of leverage they had the second they tried to hijack our guest list. The morning of the wedding, I woke up at 6 a.m. Haley was still asleep, curled under a blanket in the guest room of the Vineyard suite. I slipped outside onto the little patio that overlooked the rows of grapevines. The sky was soft pink, the grass still damp with dew. I felt calm, lighter than I'd felt in years. The ceremony was perfect, intimate, warm. Every chair filled with people who wanted to be there, people who supported us, cheered for us, laughed, and cried with us. Haley looked radiant, not just in the dress, but in the way she carried herself. She'd seen me at my worst, and she was still here. We were still here. The officiant, an old college professor of mine, delivered a short, thoughtful speech about love being a choice, not a performance. I caught myself glancing at the rows of empty chairs that had once been reserved for my parents, my brother, and half a dozen aunts and uncles. At first, those gaps had terrified me. Now they felt like breathing room. After the ceremony, the celebration kicked off. There was laughter, champagne, dancing, no awkward small talk, no forced smiles. My best man made a joke during his toast about Haley having a lot of patience to marry a guy who once called her bro on a first date. People roared. Then, because poetic timing is apparently real, my phone buzzed during the dessert hour. A new voicemail from my mother. I didn't play it right away. I waited until the evening when the music slowed and the stars came out. Haley and I were tucked under the gazebo, catching our breath between songs. I showed her the notification. "Play it," she said. "Let's hear the final act." I put it on speaker. Her voice cracked the moment it started. "Mark, I just wanted to say that today should have been different. I thought you'd come to your senses. I thought you'd miss us. But instead, you shut us out like strangers. I don't know what she did to you, but this isn't the son I raised." There it was, still blaming Haley, still framing herself as the victim. She continued, "I don't know if we'll ever speak again, but if you ever do want to rebuild this family, it starts with an apology." Click. I stared at the phone for a long moment. Was that her idea of peace? Haley asked dryly. "No," I said. "That was her idea of power." I deleted the message. The next morning, we drove off to our honeymoon cabin in the mountains. No reception, no emails, no headlines, just us in the quiet and the kind of peace that only comes from finally letting go of people who never actually loved you. Just the version of you they could control. 3 weeks later, we returned home to a mailbox stuffed with envelopes. Most were wedding cards, sweet notes, gift receipts. One was from an aunt who'd quietly declined to pick sides but had watched everything from a distance. Inside was a short letter. "Mark, I know you think we all sided with your parents. Some of us didn't. We just stayed quiet because we were scared. But watching you stand your ground, it made me wish I'd done the same years ago. You didn't lose a family. You uncovered who they were. Congratulations on everything, Aunt Janice." I pinned that letter to the corkboard above my desk. It became my reminder that sometimes drawing a boundary doesn't divide a family, it reveals it, and that choosing peace over performance is always worth it, even when it costs you the illusion of togetherness. Tyler sent one last email about a month after the wedding. No subject line, just a paragraph. "You could have had us there. You could have fixed it, but you chose her. Hope you're happy." I didn't reply because I was happy. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation for that. I hadn't lost anything. I'd gained something I never had before. Freedom, peace, and the right to live my life without apologizing for it. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My name's Aaron. I'm 31, and until recently, I would have said I was close with my younger brother, Jake. We weren't those call everyday kind of siblings, but we grew up tight, shared bunk beds, built Lego cities together, and even covered for each other during high school parties gone sideways. When he moved 3 states over for a job in finance and met his now fiancée, Courtney, I was genuinely happy for him. I hadn't met her in person yet, but he'd sent me photos and gushed about her in texts. "She's classy," he'd say. "Sophisticated. She makes me level up, man." I didn't quite know what that meant, but I told him I was proud of him. When he hinted at proposing, I even offered to help with the ring. At first, he refused, but a few weeks later, he called and asked somewhat sheepishly if I was serious. "Yeah," I said without hesitation. 10 grand? Just don't get scammed at a mall kiosk." I wired it the next day. No strings, no contract, just family. Fast forward to the week of the engagement party. Jake called me up and asked if I'd be coming. I live 9 hours away, but I said of course I wouldn't miss it. "Courtney's family is coming in from California, so it's going to be big," he said. I booked a hotel for 2 nights, cleaned out my car, and loaded up a bottle of vintage wine I'd been saving since college, something I thought might make a nice engagement gift. I even bought a new dress shirt. I wanted to look sharp, especially if I was going to meet the future in-laws. I pulled into the event venue on a Saturday afternoon, a nice country club on the outskirts of town, and parked beside a sea of expensive SUVs and luxury sedans. Already, I felt slightly out of place. The moment I walked through the double doors, I saw Courtney. She was standing with two other women, laughing. Jake hadn't seen me yet, so I approached her first, smiling. "Hi, you must be Courtney. I'm Aaron." She glanced at me. Not smiled, not nodded, just scanned. Her eyes flicked from my shoes to my collar like she was trying to find a reason to be unimpressed. Then she leaned in slightly, tilted her head, and with this passive, sugary tone, said, "Oh, you showed up." I blinked, thinking, maybe I misheard her. But then she turned to one of the women beside her and muttered, loud enough for me to catch, "We already have too many nobodies here." The woman beside her let out a little chuckle like it was an inside joke. I stood there stunned. I wanted to believe I misinterpreted the tone or that maybe it was some weird attempt at dry humor, but the disdain on her face was unmistakable. She didn't introduce me to anyone, didn't call Jake over, just turned slightly, signaling the conversation was over. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intentional dismissal with a smile. And I wasn't about to stand there like a decorative coat rack, hoping someone would acknowledge I'd driven 600 miles to be treated like a nobody. I looked around the room. It was packed. Waiters floated by with champagne. Laughter echoed from polished corners of the space. Somewhere in the back, I spotted Jake, my brother, talking to what looked like her dad and a man in a gray blazer. For a split second, I thought about pushing through the crowd, finding him, telling him what she said. But then another thought hit me. If this is how she acted before marriage when things are supposed to be polite and welcoming, how is she going to treat the rest of the family afterward? And more importantly, how did Jake not see this? I stepped outside. The sun was already beginning to dip, casting a soft glow over the parking lot. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes, letting the heat soak into the seats, my fingers still wrapped around the wine bottle I never got to hand over. My phone buzzed. 2 texts from Jake. "Where are you?" Followed by, "Courtney said she saw you. Everything okay?" I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my banking app. The transfer I'd made for the ring. It hadn't been that long ago. And because I'd sent it via Zelle through my business account, and the funds hadn't fully settled into his yet due to a flagged transaction note, I still had a narrow window. I pressed reverse transaction. Pinged for a moment, then confirmed. My chest felt weird. Not triumphant, not guilty, just solid. Like I was putting a brick back into place that had been loosened. I stared at the confirmation screen for another few seconds, then blocked both their numbers. The wine bottle stayed in the passenger seat. And as I pulled out of the lot, I glanced once in the rearview mirror at the glowing venue behind me, full of people who apparently did belong. That night, back at my hotel, I ordered a burger, sat on the bed, and posted one single screenshot to Instagram. The reverse transaction. 10 grand. Gone. Captioned simply, "Congrats to the happy couple. Hope entitlement pays better than I did." The next morning, my phone stayed quiet. No buzzing, no calls, no texts. It was like the world had collectively inhaled and decided to hold its breath. I checked my socials once. My post had already gathered a few subtle likes from cousins and old friends who, I suspected, knew exactly what it meant without needing an explanation. No one commented, not publicly, but my DMs, those started lighting up by noon. First was my cousin Lexi. "Wait, was that real?" Then my aunt, who always said Jake was too quick to fall in love. I had a feeling about her. And then a message from my old friend Malik, who had been at Jake's graduation years ago. "Man, that's cold. You good?" But not a word from Jake. I checked WhatsApp. He hadn't even opened the last message I'd sent him 3 days prior about road conditions on the way up. Still unread, still gray. I could imagine the situation unfolding in real time. Courtney scrolling, seeing the post, realizing what it meant. Jake standing behind her, maybe at first confused, maybe thinking it was some sort of joke, then realizing the money, the actual $10,000, was no longer theirs, that this wasn't symbolic. It was real. That night, I got an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, then listened. It was Jake. His voice was tight, stressed. "Aaron, listen. I don't know what happened yesterday. I'm trying to understand why you left without saying anything. Courtney said you were rude. I don't know, man. She said you made a scene. I didn't see anything myself. I was talking to her dad, but now this post, the transfer. Bro, this is really not cool. Can we talk? I stared at the wall for a long time before deleting the message. He still didn't get it. I hadn't made a scene. I hadn't raised my voice. Hadn't even caused a ripple in their perfectly curated social spectacle. But to Courtney, my silence was the problem. She wanted to look down and have me stay there. Instead, I walked away. That didn't fit the narrative she'd crafted in her head. And now she was scrambling to rewrite it. And Jake? Jake was stuck trying to keep up, still spinning plates for someone who didn't see people, only utility. The next message came not from Jake, but from his fiancée. And this time, she didn't bother with fake pleasantries. Hey Aaron. Not sure what the point of that post was, but it's incredibly childish and inappropriate. Jake is devastated. We had family flying in, vendors, everything. This was supposed to be a joyful day. Your little stunt made people ask questions. I don't know what you thought you were proving, but congratulations. I guess you embarrassed yourself more than anyone. Hope it was worth it. That one I screenshotted for myself as a reminder of how people show you who they are when they think you owe them something. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned off my phone for the day and drove to a nearby state park. Walked a trail I found by accident. Ate a sandwich in total silence under a tree while my thoughts played ping pong in my head. Was I overreacting? Maybe. But here's what stuck with me. I'd offered help without being asked. I'd driven nearly half a day to show support. I'd shown up, not for recognition, but because that's what family does. And the second I no longer served a role in her vision of the perfect celebration, I was dismissed like background noise. Not even with malice, worse, with indifference. 2 days later, things escalated. I came home to a letter in the mail, an actual printed letter postmarked from Jake and Courtney's address. Inside was a carefully worded but icy message that read like it had been proofread by 3 different lawyers and 1 wedding planner. It started with, "We regret that tensions have escalated between us in a way that overshadowed what should have been a celebration of love and family." Then it moved to, "While we understand that emotions were high, your decision to revoke your generous contribution has created complications we're now left to resolve. And finally, we kindly ask that you consider rescinding the funds as previously agreed. If not, we may have to explore other avenues to ensure commitments are honored." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because they thought they could guilt me into paying for the privilege of being insulted. That last line, especially, "explore other avenues," sounded like a threat wrapped in wedding lace. So I made a decision. If this was about optics, then I'd give them optics. I opened my laptop, pulled up a fresh post, and started writing. Not petty, not angry, just facts. I laid it out that I gifted the ring money without condition, showed up with joy in my heart, was dismissed to my face like an uninvited ghost, and quietly removed myself. That I hadn't wanted drama, hadn't posted names, but they had pushed me to the point where now I felt no obligation to remain silent. I even included Courtney's text. No names again, just screenshots with the names blacked out. The words spoke for themselves. I hit post. It went viral in hours. But that's where things really started to unravel. By the time I woke up the next morning, the post had over 11,000 likes and nearly 2,000 comments. I hadn't expected that. I figured maybe some mild traction, some Reddit-level justice for a messy sibling story. But this was wildfire. People dissected every line, praised the quiet walkout as classy, analyzed Courtney's text like it was a villain monologue, and most of all, flooded the thread with their own stories of being treated like outsiders by people who were supposed to be family. And that's when the DMs started again. But this time, it wasn't from family. It was from strangers. One message read, "Please tell me you didn't send the money again. You handled that like a boss." Another, "Bro, I got disinvited from my sister's wedding after I paid for her cake. I wish I had done what you did." People were invested, but the ones that really got to me were from other siblings. People who were always the helper, the fixer, the one who paid for dinner, and never got a thank you. I didn't realize how many errands were out there until the internet showed me. But not everyone was on my side. My mom called that afternoon. I ignored it. She called again. Then came the voicemail. Aaron, what is going on? Your brother just called me in tears. Courtney is humiliated. Her parents saw whatever it is you posted. I don't know what she said to you, but this has gone too far. It's public now. You need to fix this. We are a family. We are a family. That line hit me harder than I expected. Not because it was true, but because I had always believed in it, even when no one else seemed to live by it. I called her back. Hey, Mom. Aaron. Thank God. Listen. No. I interrupted. You listen. Did Jake tell you what she said to me when I walked in? She went quiet. I showed up. I brought a gift. I smiled. And she looked me up and down and said they already had too many nobodies there. You think I made that up? More silence. Then her voice, softer now. She may have mentioned something about a misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding, Mom. She meant it. And you know what? It's fine. She can think whatever she wants. But I'm not paying for people who treat me like lint on their designer blazer. Her tone hardened again. You didn't have to embarrass them. No, Mom. They embarrassed themselves. I just held up a mirror. And with that, I hung up. I don't think I'd ever done that before. Hanging up on my mom wasn't something I thought I was even capable of doing. But something had cracked open in me. Not in a dramatic way, just a slow, steady realization that I'd spent my entire life trying to earn scraps of approval from people who wouldn't even save me a seat at the table, literally. Over the next couple days, Jake finally responded to the growing online firestorm. His first attempt was a vague Instagram story with some generic quote about family always finding a way back to each other. That got ratioed in the comments section by people linking my original post. Then Courtney posted a staged black and white photo of the two of them holding hands with a caption that read, "Sometimes the people you think are in your corner are only there to keep you in your place." That one? Oh, it backfired hard. Her comments were flooded. Girl, you paid for your ring. Imagine insulting the wallet and still expecting to keep the gift. Sis, this is not the flex you think it is. A week passed. I figured things would eventually die down and I'd go back to work and leave the circus behind. But then I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Uncle Drew. Now, Drew is one of those relatives that shows up at holidays with stories too wild to be real and a laugh that sounds like gravel in a blender. But he's also the guy who loaned my dad money when his business went under, never asked for it back, and once drove across 3 states to help my cousin move out of an abusive relationship. Basically, if anyone in the family could smell nonsense, it was Drew. Kid, he said when I answered. You've been busy. I laughed weakly. Yeah. Didn't mean for it to blow up. Don't apologize, he said. You handled that better than most would have. But listen, something's coming. You should be ready. What do you mean? Let's just say Courtney's folks don't like the bad press. Her dad's got connections. He's worried about how this makes them look. Word is they're trying to dig into you. I sat up straighter. What does that even mean? I'm not famous. I'm not rich. They don't care. They're used to power working for them. They think if they can discredit you, maybe they can rewrite the story, make you look unstable, bitter, that sort of thing. I figured you should know. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in total silence. Discredit me for what? For refusing to fund my own humiliation? That night, I started locking everything down. Set my social profiles to private, changed passwords, double-checked my financial accounts because even if it sounded paranoid, I wasn't going to be the guy who shrugged it off and then got blindsided. Then, just when I thought the worst of it had passed, I got an envelope in the mail, plain white, no return address. Inside, a printed screenshot of my Instagram post and a typed message. This isn't over. Some things are bigger than you. Choose wisely. I stared at that typed message for a long time. The paper was thick, high quality, the kind used for resumes or courtroom letters. No handwriting, no return address, just that line centered and ominous. This isn't over. Some things are bigger than you. Choose wisely. It felt like the kind of vague, arrogant warning someone gives when they think intimidation works better than logic. And honestly, for a second, it did shake me. The fact that someone had taken the time to print a screenshot and physically mail it felt so theatrical, so specific, that I realized this wasn't just someone venting their frustration. This was a warning shot. I knew immediately where it had come from. Courtney's father, Rick, was a former district manager for some Fortune 500 company. I'd only ever seen him in photos, all of which looked like LinkedIn profile pictures with just a little too much smugness behind the smile. Jake had mentioned once that Rick ran his family like a business, and I finally understood what that meant. Control, image, leverage, everything had to serve a narrative. And when it didn't, Rick found a way to spin it or crush it. This was spin. I didn't respond. I didn't tell Jake. I didn't post anything. Instead, I lawyered up. I had a friend from college named Serena who'd become a civil litigator, brilliant, sharp as a tack, and someone who'd been by my side when I was broke, anxious, and starting out in the real world. I called her up and explained everything, start to finish. She didn't even hesitate. "You need to get ahead of this," she said. "Because if they're willing to go this far over a social media post and 10 grand, they're trying to make you their cautionary tale. You embarrass them in a space they thought they controlled. They'll want to reestablish dominance." The next day, Serena filed a preemptive cease and desist letter. It wasn't aggressive, just formal and clear. It laid out the facts. I had every right to reverse the transaction given it was a gift and the transfer had not completed. I had not named names in my post. I had not violated any laws or engaged in slander. However, if attempts were made to harass or intimidate me, legal recourse would follow. We mailed a copy to Jake and Courtney's address, then one to Rick's home and his work address. Then, for good measure, Serena posted a redacted version of the letter to her professional page with a caption that simply said, "A reminder that threats don't always land quietly." And like dominoes, everything began to fall. I didn't hear from Jake directly, but my cousin Lexi did. She messaged me saying Jake had lost it after the letter arrived. Apparently, Rick had promised to clean up the situation, and now it was turning into a PR mess. Courtney's father had connections, sure, but not enough to bully a documented legal case into disappearing. They couldn't claim defamation without specifics. They couldn't touch me financially, and trying to paint me as a problematic sibling only backfired once people started asking why their golden boy needed my money to propose in the first place. 2 weeks later, another envelope arrived. This one had handwriting, Jake's. Inside was a card, the kind you'd find at a gas station last minute. It said, "Sorry," in gold letters and nothing else. But inside, Jake had written, "I messed up. I know. I should have said something when she talked to you like that. I was scared. I still am, but this has spiraled. And I think you were the only one brave enough to walk away. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve any of this. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just didn't want to stay silent anymore. It wasn't much, but it was something." I sat with the card in my lap, wondering if I should reply, wondering if I wanted to. I thought about all the times I'd covered for Jake, supported him, made excuses for him when our parents praised his achievements and glanced over mine. I thought about the long car ride I'd taken, the wine bottle I never gave, the look on Courtney's face like I was some stray animal that had wandered into her polished party. And then I thought about that smile I gave her. The one I gave before I reversed the payment, before I blocked them, before I walked out. I'd never felt more calm in my life, so I didn't respond. Instead, I packed up the card with the letter and the envelope and tucked them into a folder. Not out of spite, but as proof. Proof that sometimes the people closest to you won't defend you. Sometimes they'll sit back and let others humiliate you just to keep the peace. And when you finally stand up for yourself, you become the villain in their story. Let them write their story. I was writing mine, too. I donated the $10,000 to a scholarship fund for first-gen college students from low-income backgrounds. I sent it in Jake's name, quietly, no announcement, no receipts, just a note that said, "To someone who deserves a future full of yes. Use it." Well, a week later, the engagement party video went private. Courtney's social media vanished. Jake's account became a blank profile photo. Mutual friends stopped asking questions. The world moved on, and so did I. I started traveling again. Small trips at first, places I'd always wanted to visit but kept putting off. I stopped trying to prove myself to people who only saw me as a backup plan. I started writing more, reconnecting with people who made me feel like I mattered, not like a budget line. The last message I got from Jake was months later. Just a text. "They're calling off the wedding." I stared at it for a long time, wondering what reaction he wanted from me. Sympathy, relief, a high five? Maybe none of that. Maybe just acknowledgement. But I didn't reply. Not out of anger. I just didn't need to, because for once the silence wasn't mine to explain. The silence was his, and it was long overdue. As for me, I'm good. I didn't lose a brother. I just stopped pretending I still had one. And truthfully, that's the most peaceful ending I could ask for. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My name is Alex. I'm 29. And if you asked anyone in my family, they'd probably describe me as the quiet one, or worse, the one who never quite figured it out. I've always been low maintenance, never asked for much. I wasn't the golden child. That title belonged to my older brother, Nathan, who followed Dad into finance, or my younger sister, Rachel, who's practically a professional social butterfly with a Pinterest-perfect life. Me, I went my own way. I built a quiet career in software, mostly remote work, decent pay, and I never bragged about it. I liked living under the radar. But what I didn't realize was that my family didn't just ignore me. They saw me as some kind of joke. Started the way it always does. A text from Mom in the family group chat. "Birthday dinner for Alex this Friday. Any suggestions?" That part was fine. I even felt a little hopeful. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe they'd remember I don't eat meat or that I'd mentioned a new place that opened downtown. But then the replies started. "Nathan, let's not go fancy. Save the good places for real accomplishments." Rachel chimed in with LOL. "True. Buffet." And Mom? She just reacted to both messages with a thumbs up. No one asked what I wanted. No one asked if I had plans. Just like every year, they made the decision and I went along with it. So Friday rolls around. I show up at this sad little buffet. Dim lighting, sticky tables, the kind of place where the sneeze guard is older than most of the staff. Everyone's already seated, halfway through their plates. No decorations, no cake, just a half-hearted, "Hey, birthday boy," from my Uncle Frank between bites of lukewarm mac and cheese. I smiled, nodded, sat down, and tried not to take it personally. I've gotten used to fading into the background. But then came the card. It was in a plain white envelope, no handwriting on the front. Inside, a generic happy birthday message printed in cursive, and someone had scribbled in blue pen underneath. "Maybe next year you'll do something worth celebrating." I stared at it. For a second, I thought it was a joke, but the way Nathan laughed, the way Rachel sipped her soda and said, "Just a little motivation," and the way Mom smiled like it was all so clever, it wasn't a joke. It was how they really saw me, as the one who never quite measured up. I didn't say anything. I just smiled, pulled out my phone, and took a quick photo of the card on the table. The cheap buffet plates in the background, my family all mid-laugh. Then I stood up, placed the card back down, and said, "Thanks for dinner." No sarcasm, no anger, just calm. I walked out before anyone could reply. The silence that followed was probably the loudest moment of the night. No one came after me. No one texted. I sat in my car, the photo still on my phone screen, and just stared at it for a long time. Something in me shifted that night. I wasn't angry, not really. I was done. Done being the silent one. Done being their scapegoat for every unspoken tension in the family. I'd spent the last 3 years building something they didn't know about. Freelance contracts, licensing deals, a quiet side project that had taken off behind the scenes. I hadn't told them because I didn't need their validation. But now I realized I didn't want their presence either. 3 days later, the group chat lit up like a Christmas tree. It started with Rachel. Did anyone else just lose access to Netflix? Then Nathan. And HBO and Spotify, what is going on? Mom followed with, I can't open the Dropbox link for the family photos anymore. And then finally, Dad, who rarely ever texted, chimed in with, the Wi-Fi went out. Alex, can you check the account? I didn't reply. Not yet. I wanted them to stew a little. They didn't know that every streaming service, every cloud account, every utility bill had been running through my name since 2020. Back when Dad got laid off and I quietly offered to help out while they got back on their feet. I never brought it up. I never asked for thanks, but I kept the receipts. And now I was done playing the background character in a family that only noticed me when something needed fixing. What really lit the fire under them, though, wasn't the Netflix or the power bill. It was the text I sent that night. One message, one photo. The same photo I took at the buffet. No caption, just the image. It was enough. Nathan replied first, "Seriously, grow up, Alex?" Then, "Mom, are you really doing this over a birthday card?" Rachel added, "It was a joke. You're being so dramatic." I didn't answer. I went offline completely, blocked the group chat, muted their numbers, and went about my day. But that silence, it didn't last long because what they hadn't realized yet, what would hit them like a brick the next morning, was that I hadn't just cut off their creature comforts. I pulled the plug on something else entirely. By Wednesday morning, I woke up to over 30 missed calls. My phone was vibrating nonstop like it had a personal vendetta. I didn't answer any of them, but I skimmed through the voicemails, each more frantic than the last. "Alex, honey, call me back. Your father is trying to get in touch with the bank and nothing's going through. Hey man, I'm not trying to fight or anything, but we're trying to log into the share drive for the tax stuff. Where is everything? Alex, this is serious. The mortgage payment bounced. Dad says your name is still on the account. What is going on?" That one made me pause. They finally realized what they had let slip through their fingers. 3 years ago, when things weren't going so great for the family, when Dad got laid off, when Rachel had to drop out of grad school for a semester, when Nathan lost a chunk of his savings on some can't-miss crypto scheme, I quietly stepped up. I had just landed a major freelance contract with a startup that exploded shortly after. I didn't make a fuss. I didn't demand attention. I just offered to help. I let the bills get rerouted through my accounts. Took on the mortgage to save them from default. Added everyone to my family plan, covered subscriptions, cloud storage, even the security system. Not because they asked, but because I thought that's what family did. And not once did anyone say thank you. They treated it like a favor I owed them. The moment I removed myself from that invisible scaffolding, their whole structure started to collapse. And the truth is, I didn't do it to hurt them. I did it to protect myself. But the pain that came as a side effect. Rachel was the first to switch tactics. She sent me a long, guilt-soaked voice note about how we've all made mistakes, and how she didn't mean anything by the card, and how maybe it's time we all sat down and talked like adults. She even threw in a casual, "I'm really proud of you, by the way," like it was something she just forgot to say for the past 5 years. Then Mom texted again, short and clipped, "You're punishing your entire family over a misunderstanding. This is not how adults behave." That one stung. Not because I believed it, but because it was so familiar. It was her default whenever someone didn't play along with the family script. Minimize the offense. Shift the blame. Paint the reaction as irrational. So, I broke my silence with a single reply. "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just done being invisible until you need something. You all made your feelings clear. Now, I'm making mine." No one replied for a full day. Then came Nathan. Not a text, not a voicemail. He showed up. I was in my apartment, small, quiet, mine. I hadn't told them I moved 6 months ago, mostly because I didn't think anyone would care, but I guess he still had the old address on file from when I helped him set up a tax form. I heard the buzzer, ignored it, then knocking, then louder knocking. Eventually, I opened the door, and there he was, my golden boy brother, dressed like he'd come from work, holding a six-pack of whatever he assumed I still drank. "Can we talk?" he asked. I leaned against the door frame. "You're here now. Go ahead." He sighed, shifted his weight awkwardly. "Look, that dinner wasn't meant to be some attack. It was a joke. We all joke around. You never speak up. So, how are we supposed to know when something actually bothers you?" That was the moment. That was the moment I realized he didn't get it. None of them did. They had built a reality where my silence was interpreted as weakness, where my absence of complaint was seen as agreement. You're not supposed to treat someone like garbage and then say, "Well, you didn't say anything." That's not how decency works, I said. He looked surprised, like the idea had never occurred to him. Okay, fair. So, what do you want? I let the question hang in the air. What did I want? An apology? No, not really. I didn't think I'd believe it if it came now. Respect, maybe, but respect that had to be forced wasn't real either. What I wanted was distance, freedom, a life not tethered to a group of people who only remembered my name when a bill was due. So I said, "I don't want anything. That's the point." Nathan's expression shifted from confusion to something like contempt. "You're seriously just going to ghost your whole family over a birthday card?" I looked him in the eye and said, "No, I'm finally holding you accountable for 3 years of taking me for granted. That card was just the receipt." He stood there for a second like he wanted to say something else. Then he left the six-pack on the ground and walked away. I didn't pick it up. And that night, I sat on my couch finally at peace. Not because I'd gotten revenge. Not because I'd made them suffer. But because for once I had chosen myself. I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. Not explanations, not money, not silence. But the fallout, that was just beginning. The next morning, I noticed the voicemail from my father. He rarely called me directly. He was more of a group texts and silent nods kind of man. His voice was gravelly and unusually calm in the message, but I could hear the frustration simmering beneath it. "Alex, your mother's upset. Your sister's in tears. You've made your point. Now be a man and fix this. Family isn't something you quit when it's inconvenient." I listened to it twice. That line, "Be a man and fix this," clanged around in my skull like a warning bell. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't even a negotiation. It was a command. The same one I'd grown up with. Dressed up in concern, but rooted in control. That's how it always was with Dad. He didn't yell. He didn't hit. But he knew how to remind you who paid the bills, even when he wasn't the one doing it. The part that would have made me laugh if it wasn't so pathetic was that he genuinely believed I still owed him after everything. After covering the mortgage for 3 years, handling Mom's overdue hospital bills when her insurance lapsed, paying off Rachel's busted credit card after she accidentally used the wrong one. I had receipts for everything. I'd been the family backbone, and they only realized it when I stepped away. Later that day, Mom sent me a Facebook message. She'd never used it for anything more than cat videos and reposting church event flyers, so I knew it was intentional. The message was short, clipped, like she was trying to hold on to the last bit of moral high ground she had left. "We're struggling. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but it's not too late to make things right. Your father says we could still refinance with your name on the paperwork. If we miss another payment, we could lose the house. Please think about your family. That house, the one I grew up in, the one they remodeled with money they didn't have while I was living in a shoebox apartment fresh out of college. The one I kept afloat when Dad's pride wouldn't let him admit we were drowning. That house had never felt like mine, even when I paid for it. And now they wanted me to come back and save it again." I didn't reply. Instead, I started gathering documents. Not because I was going to help them, but because I wanted to protect myself. You see, I'd never officially signed over financial responsibility. The utilities, the streaming services, even the loan I co-signed for Rachel's short-lived bakery dream. They were all still legally linked to me. If they defaulted, I would take the hit. That's what scared me the most. Not their manipulation, not their entitlement, but how quietly and completely they'd woven their lives into mine without giving me any voice. So, I made calls, canceled the cosign, contacted the electric company, and formally removed myself from the account. I locked down my credit profile, froze every account that wasn't solely mine. I wasn't just walking away anymore. I was shutting the door behind me. Took 2 days. And when the dust settled, I got one final message that stopped me cold. It was from Grandma. She was the only person in the family who ever treated me like I mattered just because I was me. She used to sneak me chocolate when I got grounded for talking back. And she never forgot a single birthday, even if it was just a card with a hand-drawn doodle and They love you always. But her text hit different. I heard what happened. I wish they saw you the way I do. I don't blame you, Alex. But I do miss you. Please don't let their foolishness harden your heart too much. You're a good man. Don't forget that. I sat with that one for a long time. The next day, I took a drive out to her place, brought her favorite cinnamon rolls and some tulips. We sat on the porch in silence for a while before she said anything. They don't deserve you, she muttered, sipping her tea. But they'll come crawling soon. Pride always bows to desperation eventually. She wasn't wrong, because the next day, right after I officially cut off the emergency credit line they'd been using behind my back, I got another knock at my door. But this time it wasn't Nathan. It was Rachel. She looked different. Not her usual polished self. No makeup, puffy eyes, hoodie, and leggings. Holding a plastic grocery bag like it was a peace offering. I brought food, she said, her voice scratchy. And I just wanted to talk. Please. I didn't move. Not at first. I kept my hand on the door frame, studying her like I didn't know her, because in a lot of ways I didn't. Not really. But something in her face, genuine or maybe just really good desperation, made me step aside. She walked in, placed the bag on the kitchen counter, and looked around like she hadn't expected to actually get this far. Alex, we messed up. Okay, we really messed up. I didn't say anything, just watched her. She looked down. I'm not going to pretend we didn't say awful things. I laughed at the card. I said things I can't take back. I've been selfish, but I didn't know how much you were carrying for all of us. I didn't know because I didn't want to know. It was easier to believe you were just the quiet one with nothing going on. She looked up, her eyes glassy. But you were the one holding everything together. And now it's all falling apart. And just like that, the room fell quiet. She was right. It was falling apart. And I could feel the moment coming. The one where she'd ask me to fix it. But I wasn't the same person who sat quietly at that buffet table last week. I looked at Rachel for a long time before answering. She fidgeted under my silence, chewing on her bottom lip like she was bracing for a punch that hadn't landed yet. I didn't come here to beg, she said quietly, as if to preempt the accusation. I thought maybe if you understood where we were coming from, you'd reconsider. Where you were coming from? I asked. That I'm not worth celebrating until I do something that fits your idea of success? That I'm the guy you all remember when a bill comes due or the Wi-Fi goes out? She winced. I know it was awful, but we thought you were fine with it. You never pushed back. You never told us anything. You just helped. Like it didn't matter. I finally sat down. My voice was level, but I could feel the pressure behind it. Years of unspoken words now fighting their way out. You know what's funny? I said. I used to think it didn't matter either. I used to think it was just easier to say nothing, to play my part. Let Nathan have his trophies. Let you have your spotlight. Let Mom and Dad pretend I was just drifting through life with no ambition. I never cared about recognition. But you know what finally hit me? It wasn't that I didn't matter. It was that you all agreed I didn't and you were comfortable with that. She sat down across from me, her shoulders hunched like she was trying to shrink under the weight of it all. I guess we thought you liked being in the background, she said weakly. Like you were just different. No, I replied. I was made the background. Every time I did something worthwhile, it was brushed aside or rebranded as luck. Every quiet success got drowned out by one of Nathan's promotions or your next big trip. I was the emotional support wall. And when you all built your house on me, you never once looked down to see who was holding it up. I stood and walked to the counter, picking up the bag she brought. Inside was takeout from my favorite Thai place, which I'd mentioned offhand in a text over a year ago. It was the first time anyone in the family had remembered something so specific about me. I appreciate this, I said, setting the bag back down. But a bag of curry doesn't fix years of being treated like I don't count. I know, she said quickly. I know it doesn't, but it's not supposed to fix anything. It's just a start. I sighed and ran a hand through my hair. Do you remember when I helped you with your bakery? I asked. Her eyes flickered. Yeah. Do you know how many loans I had to defer to front that $15,000? She swallowed hard. No, I didn't. Of course you didn't. Because you never asked. No one ever did. She looked at me with something like shame, but also, maybe for the first time, real understanding. You want me to come back? I said. To the group chat, to the bills, to the support system you all relied on. But you never once asked me how I was doing. You never once treated me like someone who had his own life, his own responsibilities, his own goals. You want the version of me that says yes and smiles while you laugh in my face. I don't, she said quickly. I swear I don't. I want this version. The one who finally tells us the truth. For a moment I believed her. But that wasn't enough anymore. I'm not coming back, I said quietly. Her eyes widened. Alex, I'm done being your safety net. I've cut off every shared service. Removed my name from everything. You'll have to figure out your own bills. Rebuild your own credit. I'm not doing it for you. She looked like she wanted to argue, but couldn't. I don't hate you, I continued. I'm not doing this to punish you, but I'm not going to let you keep using me either. I deserve more than pity and guilt-tripped loyalty. I deserve respect. I respect you, she whispered. Then let me go, I said. Respect me enough to let me walk away. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded slowly. Will you ever come back? She asked. I shook my head. Not until I'm treated like someone you actually want in your life. Not just someone you need. She stood. Her hands were shaking as she picked up the bag of food. She held it out to me. Keep it, she said. Even if you don't want to see us again, just eat something, please. I took it. That was the only thing I accepted. When she left, I locked the door behind her. And for the first time in years, I felt something lift off my shoulders. The silence in the apartment was no longer hollow. It was peaceful. I spent the next few weeks in near-complete solitude. No group chats, no frantic calls, no obligations pulling me in every direction but my own. I used the time to build my life, something just for me. I accepted a new remote contract with a tech firm in Sweden, paid off the last of my deferred loans, and even booked a solo trip to Kyoto, something I'd wanted to do since college. Took them a while to realize I wasn't bluffing. Nathan sent one last message. You've made your point, but don't forget who helped you get where you are. I didn't reply. I just screenshotted the message and archived it in a folder I now called Noise. Mom sent a birthday card the following year. No jokes, just a simple handwritten note. I'm sorry. I miss you. Love, Mom. I didn't respond to that either. Not out of bitterness, but because I learned something vital. You can forgive people without giving them access to hurt you again. 6 months later, I got a letter in the mail from Grandma. Inside was a small, square photograph of the two of us on our porch, tulips in her lap, cinnamon roll in hand. She'd written on the back in her wobbly handwriting, "They're learning slowly, but you don't owe them your peace. Keep going. I'm proud of you." That one I framed. Now I live in a sunlight-filled apartment in Stockholm. I work with a brilliant small team. I walk to a nearby lake every morning with my coffee, and I've started painting again. I still don't make noise about my success. I don't post humble brags or drop subtle hints in group chats because I no longer need them to see me to feel seen. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My name's Evan. I'm 32 and up until last Christmas. I thought my family was flawed but functional. You know, the kind of dysfunction you roll your eyes at but tolerate because, well, they're family. That illusion shattered in the weeks following my breakup with Kara. We'd been together for nearly 6 years. My mom used to call her the daughter she never had. My cousins invited her to girls' nights and spa weekends. She fit in like some custom puzzle piece my family didn't know they were missing. So, when things fell apart between us, I didn't expect them to throw her out, but I didn't expect them to throw me out either. The breakup wasn't messy, at least not from the outside. No cheating, no screaming matches, just slow emotional erosion. Kara wanted kids yesterday, and I wasn't sure I wanted them at all. We tried counseling, we talked, we argued, we cried. Eventually, she packed a suitcase, left me the apartment key, and walked out. I didn't chase her. That apparently was my big crime. I didn't tell anyone right away. I needed space, but Kara did. She went straight to my mom's house, sobbing, saying she didn't know what went wrong, that I just gave up on her. My mother called me 3 days later, not to ask how I was, not even to confirm the breakup. She just said, "I hope you know you've hurt her deeply, Evan. She deserves better." Click. That was it. The next week, I got a group text from my aunt confirming details for the annual family Christmas dinner. Location: Grandma's house, same as always. Time: 5 p.m. sharp. I hadn't decided if I'd go. Everything felt raw and weird. Then I noticed something odd. Kara was tagged in the group. Kara, my ex, who hadn't been family for barely a month. So I replied, asking if that was a mistake. My uncle answered before anyone else. "She's still family to us. Evan, don't make this awkward. Don't make this awkward." The phrase ricocheted in my head for hours, as if I was the one disturbing the peace. As if I was the storm they had to tiptoe around, not the guy who lost his partner and got quietly erased from his own family traditions. I told myself not to read too much into it. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Then my mom called. She never calls unless it's serious. "Hi, honey. Listen, I know this year's a bit different." She began in that overly sweet tone she uses before saying something awful. "But we've all decided it would be best if you come to Christmas only if you promise not to make a scene. We just want things to be peaceful for the kids." Peaceful for the kids. And there it was. Not only was Kara still invited, she had apparently been given my seat. Literally. Grandma always made place cards. I found out from my cousin Jess that mine was missing this year. Kara was sitting between Mom and Aunt Lisa. "It's just easier." Jess had texted like that made it okay. Like I was a problem to manage. Not a son, not a human being. I sat in my apartment that night, the silence pressing in, and laughed. Not bitterly, not angrily, just this quiet, exhausted laugh. It hit me how ridiculous it all was. I'd bent over backwards for this family. Paid off my parents' mortgage when Dad got sick. Helped my uncle's failing business stay afloat during the pandemic. I even co-signed a car loan for my brother last year. And now I was being asked not to make things awkward. So I replied to my mom the next morning. Just one sentence. "I'd rather freeze alone than pretend this is family." Then I turned off my phone. For the next few days, I didn't hear a word from anyone. No one called. No one checked on me. But I had a few things I needed to take care of. Specifically, a few levers I could pull. See, what no one in my family ever really understood was how much they relied on me behind the scenes. They liked to brag about sticking together and doing things as a team, but when push came to shove, it was usually me footing the bill or cleaning up the mess. And I had receipts, literal ones. I didn't do anything right away. I gave them time. I wanted to see if anyone would reach out, apologize, maybe even show a shred of empathy. They didn't. But I did notice that on Christmas Eve, Kara posted a photo on Instagram of her and my mom in matching aprons, laughing in the kitchen. The caption read, "Back where I belong. Heart emoji #family." My stomach twisted, but only for a moment. That night, I opened my laptop. I logged into the car loan portal first, the one I co-signed for my brother, Josh. I didn't cancel anything. I just removed myself as the guarantor. That instantly triggered a credit review on his account. He'd missed a few payments. I knew that I'd been covering them quietly to protect his score. Then I opened the mortgage lender's site. The payments were current, but only because I had a recurring wire set up from my business account. I canceled it. The next installment was due January 5th. Next, my uncle's storefront. His little cafe downtown that I'd helped lease under my name during COVID so he wouldn't default. I contacted the property manager and informed them I wouldn't be renewing the agreement. The lease was up in 3 months. Still, I didn't say anything. I just waited. Christmas morning came and went. No texts, no calls, just another picture of Kara surrounded by my family. Captioned, "Home for the holidays." Heart emoji. My jaw tightened, but I held it. I wasn't going to send angry messages or post cryptic Instagram quotes. I was going to let gravity do its work. And it did. On December 29th, my Aunt Lisa cracked first. She showed up outside my apartment building, shivering in a thin coat, holding a Tupperware of cookies like it was a peace offering. I didn't buzz her in, but I answered the intercom. "Evan, sweetie, please, we just want to talk," she said. Her voice trembled a bit. "Your uncle told me about the lease situation. He's panicking. Just tell us what you want." I didn't answer her. Not then. I watched her through the window from my second-floor apartment, clutching the Tupperware, looking up at my building like it might swallow her whole. After a minute, she walked away, her steps hesitant, almost like she expected me to come chasing after her. I didn't. Instead, I sat down at my desk, opened my notebook, the one where I'd written down every favor, every temporary loan, every quiet bailout I'd provided over the last 5 years, and started drawing lines. Not out of pettiness, out of clarity. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was simply choosing not to keep enabling people who only saw my value when I was useful to them. December 30th, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring out. Then again, 5 minutes later, then a text. "Evan, it's Josh. We need to talk, please. I'm at Mom's. Can we meet?" That one stung. I won't lie. My younger brother and I had always had a strange relationship. He was the golden boy growing up, captain of the football team. Charm turned up to 11. When he got fired from his job last year and had nowhere to turn, I didn't hesitate. I helped him get back on his feet, covered his loan payments, even drove 2 hours to help him move into a new place. And now he was calling me like I was the problem. I didn't reply. He called again that evening. This time, he left a voicemail. "Evan, look, I didn't know what Mom and Kara were doing. Okay, I thought you were fine with it. You didn't say anything. Please just call me back, man. They're freaking out. They're freaking out." Not, he was sorry. Not, he felt guilty. They were freaking out. December 31st, 11:40 p.m. While most people were drinking champagne and waiting for the ball to drop, I sat alone on my balcony with a drink and a blanket, watching fireworks light up the city skyline. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Grandma, the woman whose house used to feel like neutral ground. She never took sides, never played favorites until this year. Her message was short. "I never meant to hurt you. Can we talk tomorrow?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I closed my phone and leaned back, listening to the city cheer the new year. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel pressure to fix everything. January 2nd, the dam finally burst. It was my mom who showed up this time. No warning, just a knock on my door at 7:30 a.m. I didn't answer right away. I stood on the other side, unsure if I even wanted to see her. But part of me, maybe the part that still remembered her hugging me when I got into college or making my favorite soup when I was sick, needed to hear what she had to say. I opened the door. She looked tired, older somehow, like the holidays had drained her. Her makeup was smudged and her voice wavered. "Hi." I didn't move. "Mom," I said. She hesitated, clutching her purse like it held all the right words. "We didn't mean to hurt you." I didn't say anything. She stepped forward slightly. "You have to understand. Kara was family. We just didn't want to lose her, too. So, you decided to lose me instead." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "That's not fair." "It's accurate." I cut in calm, flat. "You told me not to make things awkward. You gave her my seat. You let her take over my holiday, and you didn't even call to see if I was okay." Silence. Then softly, "I thought you needed space." "I needed support," I replied. But I didn't realize support came with terms and conditions. She looked like she might cry, but I didn't feel the usual rush of guilt that used to follow. I'd spent years shrinking myself to make everyone else comfortable. Not anymore. Finally, she said, "Please just tell us what you want." I looked at her, really looked, and realized she wasn't asking how to fix things. She was asking how to get her comfort back. I could have asked for a lot, an apology, a family meeting, public accountability, but that would have been for them. I wasn't interested in teaching them a lesson. I was interested in rebuilding myself. So I said, "I don't want anything. Not anymore." She opened her mouth, then closed it. No script, No quick fix, just the reality of a door she couldn't walk through anymore. I stepped back and shut the door gently. Later that day, I got an email from the leasing office of the cafe. My uncle had begged for a lease extension. I denied it. Then I finally logged into my bank and officially ended all automatic transfers to my parents' mortgage. The last string I had left was the business account, a shared account I'd opened years ago to help keep things in the family when we were planning group investments. I'd forgotten about it, honestly, but I checked it, and that's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. 2 months ago, while I was still with Kara, someone had made a withdrawal. A large one, almost 5 figures, labeled event prep. On the same day, Kara had posted about a mysterious girl's getaway and the name on the authorization. Mom. I stared at it. Then I picked up my phone, took a screenshot, and attached it to a new email. It said, "Happy New Year. Let me know how you'd like to pay this back before I involve someone else." I hit send. The reply came faster than I expected. Less than 10 minutes after I hit send, I got a call. I didn't answer. Then another, then a barrage of texts from my mother. All variations of, "It's not what you think. We'll explain everything. Please don't do anything rash." And finally, "This will destroy your family, Evan. Is that what you want?" That one made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because of the sheer audacity of it, as if I was the one holding the sledgehammer. As if they hadn't already done the demolition brick by brick. And now they were panicking because someone finally noticed the house had no foundation. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed out the transaction record, highlighted the withdrawal, and added a note at the bottom. For review, this transaction was unauthorized. Formal action pending. Then, I mailed a copy to the shared bank's fraud department and CC'd the branch manager I'd known for years. Nothing aggressive, just a nudge in the right direction. I wasn't bluffing. That money was in my name. That account was opened under my LLC for tax reasons. Technically, Mom had no legal access to it. Someone must have left the login open. Maybe Kara, maybe one of my cousins who had temporary access during the holidays last year. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that it wasn't hers to touch. The silence that followed was delicious. No more texts. No more guilt-laced voicemails. Just quiet until January 5th. That was the day the mortgage payment bounced. My father's name was still on the loan, but the payment had been coming from my business account for the last 2 years. Quietly, consistently, because back when he got sick and the family was too proud to ask for help, I'd offered to cover it behind the scenes so no one would feel ashamed. I never asked for thanks. Now the bank called, not me, him. My father hadn't spoken to me since the breakup. Not a single word. Not even a thumbs-up emoji in the family chat. But that night, my phone rang. I recognized the number. Landline, the old house. I picked up. Evan. His voice sounded like sandpaper. Dad. Pause, long, heavy. "I just got off the phone with the bank," he said. Like I didn't know. "Right?" I replied. "They probably want their money." "What are you doing?" His voice was cold, controlled. "Are you trying to punish us?" "No," I said simply. "I'm just done pretending this is family." He exhaled sharply. "So, this is about Kara." My jaw clenched. "This is about everything. You think we owe you for helping us? Is that it?" "I think," I said slowly, "that you all got very comfortable taking from me without ever once thinking you'd have to give anything back or even treat me like a person." Another pause. "Then you're making a mistake." "No," I said. "You did when you chose Kara over me. When you invited her to Christmas and told me not to be awkward. When you made it clear that the only version of me you liked was the one who kept his mouth shut and his wallet open." I waited for him to say something. Anything. But he didn't. He hung up. 3 hours later, my cousin Jess called. I ignored it. Then my aunt, then my brother again. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They weren't calling because they were sorry. They were calling because the system was collapsing. The mortgage was unpaid. The lease was expiring. The business accounts were being flagged. And that was before the Real bomb dropped. January 7th, I got a call from the cafe landlord. Apparently, My uncle had tried to negotiate a last-minute lease extension, except the property manager had already started showing the space to new tenants. They found a local bakery chain that was interested, and the manager had let it slip, purely by accident, that the reason the current leaseholder, me, was stepping away was due to unauthorized financial activity under the business. The cafe's biggest supplier heard the rumor. Then, the health inspector, who just happened to be married to the new bakery's owner. By January 10th, word was spreading that my uncle's cafe might be involved in fraud or tax evasion. It wasn't true. Not entirely. But I didn't do anything to stop it. Why should I? Let them live in the fog for a while. Let them understand what it feels like to be treated like an inconvenience, a liability, a mess to clean up later. And that's when Kara finally reached out. A long, rambling email. No greeting, no subject line, just a wall of text. I didn't know what they were doing. Your mom said you were fine with it. She said it was still our family. I just wanted to feel like I belonged. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please believe me. She didn't apologize for the money or the Christmas photos or the caption that read, "Home for the holidays." Just a soft, sad attempt to reel me back into the same manipulation web they'd all been spinning for years. I archived the email without replying. That night, I went to the mailbox and found a letter from my grandmother. Her handwriting, always so elegant, so deliberate, was shaky. Evan, I don't know how we got here. I don't blame you for stepping away, but I hope you know that you were always my favorite. I just didn't know how to show it when things got loud. I'm sorry I stayed quiet. I hope you come back someday. But if you don't, I understand. That letter nearly broke me because I could feel the weight behind it. The regret, the sorrow, the too late honesty. I cried quietly alone in my apartment, but I didn't call her. Not yet. They still didn't know the last piece. The trust. Back when I was still trying to build a future with Kara, I'd started setting up a family trust with my accountant. The plan was to use some of my tech startup windfall to build a generational safety net, college funds for cousins, retirement stipends for my parents, emergency grants for relatives in need. The paperwork had been filed, but the trust had never been finalized. The funds were still mine, and every single person who'd hurt me, they were all listed as future beneficiaries. Until now. I opened the doc, deleted every single name, paused, then typed one in, my goddaughter, my cousin's baby girl, the only one in the whole family too young to know what was happening. The only one I could look at and feel no resentment toward. Then I hit save. A few minutes later, my phone lit up again. Mom calling again. I stared at it, heart calm, fingers still. I let the call ring out. Then I turned off my phone. I knew what was coming. I could feel it like pressure building behind a dam. There was nothing left for them to spin. No angle they could work. The levers were pulled and the machine was breaking down in real time. The next morning, I opened my laptop and logged into the trust account. The one that once held the promise of generational safety for a family that never saw me as anything more than a tool. I'd already deleted the names of my parents, my uncle, my brother, even Jess, who had always meant well but never once stood up for me when it counted. The only name I kept was the baby girl who still had a chance to grow up outside of this cycle. The rest, they were out. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I got dressed. Not in sweats, not in something practical. I put on a suit, a dark navy one. The kind of thing I'd worn during investor meetings, during tech pitches, when I used to pretend my worth was tied to what I could provide. Only this time, I wasn't wearing it to impress anyone. I was wearing it to walk into my parents' house with dignity. I drove the 20 minutes to their place without music. Just the sound of tires on pavement and my thoughts unspooling like film. When I pulled up to the driveway, it looked the same. Modest two-story with overgrown hedges and the same wind chimes that had annoyed me since high school. But inside, I knew everything was different. The door opened before I even knocked. My mom stood there, eyes swollen, her lips trembling. Then behind her, my dad lingered in the hallway, arms crossed, looking older than I remembered. "Evan," she said softly, like we were picking up from a normal day, like everything hadn't been unraveling since Christmas. "Mom," I said, "can we talk? That's why I'm here." She stepped aside and I walked in, the weight of silence hanging between us. We moved to the living room. Same beige couch, same faded family photos. Except one was missing. The framed picture of me and Kara from my sister's wedding. I noticed the empty space on the mantel immediately. Maybe they took it down out of guilt. Maybe Kara had asked for it. I didn't ask. I sat down. They didn't. I don't even know where to start, my dad said, rubbing the back of his neck. Try the beginning, I offered. Maybe with how you thought it was okay to side with my ex-girlfriend over your own son. My mom flinched. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said. You gave her my seat at Christmas dinner. You told me not to make it awkward, and you didn't even call to ask how I was doing. But you hugged her in the kitchen like she was the one who lost everything. My father opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. I'm not here to rehash it, I said. I've said everything I need to say. I came to tell you where things stand. They both looked at me then, really looked. For the first time in a long time, I think they saw me not as the son who would always come back, always help, always carry the weight, but as someone who had finally put it down. I've pulled out of the mortgage, I said. The bank's been notified. If you want to keep this house, you'll need to restructure the loan yourselves. My dad's jaw clenched, but he didn't interrupt. I've also dissolved the shared business accounts and withdrawn the LLC sponsorship from the cafe lease. If Uncle Mark wants to keep that space, he'll need to sign a new lease with the landlord directly under his own credit. My mother's voice cracked. Evan, we didn't mean to. I know, I said. You just didn't think I'd ever stop. They looked at each other, a quiet panic in their expressions. I could tell they hadn't planned for this. They thought the texts, the voicemails, maybe even the visit from Grandma would soften me. That the guilt would wear me down the way it always had. But they were too late. And the money, I added. The withdrawal from my trust account, the one labeled Event Prep. I've reported it to the bank. If you pay it back by the end of the month, I'll drop the fraud report. My mom's mouth fell open. That was unauthorized, I said. And illegal. She sat down, suddenly looking like she might collapse. My dad remained standing, stiff and silent. Why are you doing this? She asked, tears slipping down her cheek. We're your family. I leaned forward. No, I said. You were my obligation for years. You leaned on me. You used me. And when I needed you, not for money, not for favors, just for presence. You gave me rules, conditions, a warning not to be a burden. She sobbed quietly into her hands. My father remained still, stoic. I stood. This is the last time we'll speak for a while, I said. Not because I hate you, but because I'm learning to love myself more than I fear being alone. They didn't stop me as I walked out. And for once, I didn't look back. Weeks passed. Then months. The fraud claim was settled quietly. The money was returned in full, likely borrowed from one of my dad's old friends. The cafe closed at the end of February, replaced by the bakery with the pastel storefront and morning jazz music. I walked by once. The windows were bright. The air smelled like fresh bread and cinnamon. Felt like closure. Kara tried to reach out a few times. A text here, a photo of her niece there. I replied once simply, hope she's doing well. She's the only one I'm leaving anything to. She never replied again. My uncle tried to smear me for a bit, called me ungrateful, said I turned my back on family, but no one listened. His cafe had failed long before I left. My money had just prolonged the inevitable. And Kara, she moved to a new city, got engaged to someone else. I found out through a mutual friend who thought I'd care. I didn't. I still had the letter from my grandmother, though. I framed it, hung it on the wall in my office. Not because it made everything okay, but because it reminded me of the one voice in the family who had tried, even if too late. Eventually, I found peace. Not the loud, triumphant kind. The quiet kind. The kind where you make breakfast in your own apartment and don't flinch when your phone buzzes. The kind where you build something not because you're expected to, but because you want to. And on my birthday, my first one spent alone in over a decade, I got one card. No name, no return address, just a single sentence. You were always the strongest one. Thank you for finally choosing you. I smiled. And for the first time in years, it wasn't bitter. It was free. Now on to the next story. Story 7. I got home to find my dog gone. My mom said, "We sold it. Your brother's kids needed new phones. You'll be fine." I asked once, "Where is he?" They laughed it off. I didn't. 2 days later, I found his and bought his back. The next day, when they found out what I had done, it made them scream. I don't even remember dropping my keys when I walked in. All I remember was the silence. Coda didn't come running. No bark, no scratch at the door, nothing. I called his name once, no answer. I walked into the kitchen and my mom was just standing there loading the dishwasher like it was any other Tuesday. I asked her where Coda was. She didn't even look up, just said, "We sold him. Your brother's kids needed new phones. You'll be fine." Something surged through me so fast I actually had to grip the counter to keep my hands steady. I asked her again, thinking maybe I'd misheard. She repeated it like it was nothing, like he was nothing. I didn't scream, but I came damn close. My jaw locked so tight it started to hurt. I stormed out before I did something I couldn't take back. My dad was in the garage fiddling with his toolbox. I asked him and he just shrugged, said they figured I'd get over it. I barely made it up to my room without slamming every door on the way. I sat on my bed staring at the empty crate. His leash was still hanging on the doorknob. His toys were in the corner like someone tossed them there without a second thought. That's when the first wave of it hit me. Not just the anger, but the realization that this wasn't some heat of the moment stupidity. They had planned this. Took something alive, something I loved, and treated him like he was a pair of sneakers for iPhones, for kids who crack screens in 3 weeks. At first, I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was some twisted justification I hadn't heard yet. But then I remembered how casually she said it, how nobody thought I'd care enough to fight back. That's when it hit me. They weren't just selfish. They genuinely believed they could take whatever they wanted from me, and I'd just deal with it. Smile, move on, like always. But this time they picked the wrong thing. I didn't go downstairs for dinner. I didn't speak to anyone. I just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and somewhere in that silence the switch flipped. I was done. I opened my laptop and started digging. Craigslist, Facebook groups, rescue sites. I looked up every listing within 200 miles. I knew he'd show up. Coda was a 6-month-old Australian shepherd. Perfect coloring, purebred, and expensive. They probably sold him fast and to someone nearby. I stayed up all night scrolling through photos, sending messages, writing down addresses. I skipped work the next day. My boss texted. I didn't answer. Around noon, I found him. He was listed under a new name, but the eyes were the same. One blue, one brown, same white stripe down the nose. They said he was being rehomed because the family didn't have time for him. The post had been up for 7 hours. I messaged them immediately, told them I could meet that day, told them I'd pay more than they were asking. The person agreed. Wanted to meet at a public park. I took out cash from my savings and drove there without telling anyone. When I saw him in the back seat of their car, I swear he recognized me before I even said his name. I brought him home without a word to anyone. When I opened the front door, my mom froze. She just stood there and stared at me like I dragged a ghost through the hallway. She said, "You bought him back?" I told her, "No, I bought back what you sold." Then I went upstairs and locked my door. They screamed that night, pounded on the walls, called me dramatic, said I ruined Christmas. I didn't answer. I was already planning what came next because if they could sell my dog for phones, they were capable of anything. And they were about to find out what I was capable of, too. When I came downstairs the next morning, the kitchen went silent. My mom was making pancakes like that was going to erase what she did. My dad had the TV on but wasn't watching it. Just sitting there flipping through a flyer like he wasn't waiting to see if I'd explode again. They both acted like nothing happened. No mention of Coda. No sorry. No, maybe we messed up. Just pancakes and small talk. I poured coffee and didn't say a word. Then I went back to my room and saw that the Wi-Fi had been changed. My phone wouldn't connect. I checked the router. Still blinking. Just locked me out. It was petty. I knew exactly what it was. Their idea of punishment. I tried calling my friend. No service. Turned out they pulled my number off the family plan, too. Just like that. No warning, not even a heads up. I sat there for a second staring at the no service message at the top of my screen and felt this weird kind of calm. Not the good kind, the type that comes right before wildfire. They thought I'd break. Crawl back downstairs, apologize, admit I was too emotional, but they forgot something. The bank account they used to pay all their bills. That was mine. Set up under my name. Months ago, my mom convinced me to make it a joint account because she said it was just easier. She didn't want to keep asking me to transfer money for stuff. Groceries, utilities, gas. Said she hated the hassle. I believed her. She started small. $40 here, $60 there. Then it turned into $200 Amazon charges. Monthly subscriptions I didn't recognize. Full gas station fills for my brother's SUV. I'd asked once what some of the charges were. She told me they were for the house. I stopped asking. But now that they cut me off like I was some leech living under their roof, I wasn't just angry. I was done playing nice. I logged in, pulled every dollar into a new account I opened in minutes, and removed her access. Then I called the bank, explained the situation, flagged dozens of transactions they'd made. The rep told me I had a good chance of reversing some of them since they weren't authorized. I sat back and stared at my laptop for a long time. Then I looked down at Coda. He was lying on his side, tongue out, legs twitching while he dreamed. They really thought they could just take him from me and that I'd take it. Not this time. I grabbed my bag, stuffed it with the essentials: laptop, clothes, chargers, notebooks, Coda's leash, some of his toys, and his food. I didn't bother leaving a note, just walked out, locked my door behind me, and drove straight to Tessa's. She was a coworker I didn't know that well, but she'd always been kind to me. A few times when I vented about home, she told me to crash at her place if I ever needed space. I'd always laughed it off. This time I didn't. I stayed on her couch the first night, Coda curled up at my feet. She didn't ask questions. Just handed me a blanket and said the guest room would be ready in the morning. Around 11 p.m., my phone lit up. I'd switched it to a prepaid SIM earlier that day. Still had Wi-Fi at Tessa's. First message was from my mom. "Where did you go?" Then my dad. "Amanda, be serious. Come home." Then my brother. "This is about the dog. Seriously." Then again from my mom. "We're worried about you." I didn't respond to any of them. I sat on the floor with my laptop and opened up a private listing site. I started looking at rentals in a completely different part of town. Not one of them apologized. Not one of them asked if I was okay. They just wanted me back because I'd made things harder for them. The next day, I got an alert on the old account. My mom tried to log in 3 times. Locked out. She texted me again. "What did you do?" Then 10 minutes later, "You need to call me now." Then again, "This is ridiculous." I turned off my phone. They'd spent years making sure I stayed dependent on them, years guilting me every time I tried to grow up, save money, make my own moves. They played it off like they were just helping me stay grounded. But now they were panicking because for the first time they couldn't reach me, couldn't track me, couldn't use me, and I was just getting started. By the 3rd day, they started unraveling. I was still at Tessa's place, sleeping in the guest room now, trying to keep things quiet, low-key. I spent most of the day job hunting. Not because I'd lost mine, but because I didn't want to spend one more week working at a place that was 5 minutes from my parents' house. Every time I looked out the window, I half expected one of them to show up. That's the kind of people they were. Show up uninvited. Spin some big "we love you" speech while slipping guilt like poison under every word. But this time they couldn't reach me. They didn't know where I was. They didn't know I'd already submitted my notice at work. They didn't know that I was cutting every wire they'd wrapped around my life since high school. And they didn't like that. It started with the texts first from my mom. "Amanda, let's stop." Then, "Where are you staying? Are you okay?" An hour later, "You're overreacting. We didn't do anything malicious." Then my dad chimed in. "This isn't how you handle problems. We're family. You don't run." Then my brother. "You stole money. You emptied the account. That's messed up." That one made me laugh. I didn't steal anything. That account was in my name. They'd been draining it for over a year like it was their personal vending machine. Groceries, streaming subscriptions, gas for cars I didn't drive. Once I found a charge from a restaurant 2 towns over. A dinner I hadn't even known they went to. My mom just said, "We figured you'd be fine covering it." They figured wrong. After I pulled the money and closed access, I filed a report with the bank and started gathering proof. Screenshots, statements, texts. I didn't know if I'd need it legally, but I wanted it documented. I didn't trust them not to twist things into some sob story later. And sure enough, they started trying to rewrite it. When they realized they couldn't guilt me into replying, they tried the next best thing. Damage control. My Aunt Pam called me saying she heard there was some drama and that maybe we should all sit down together and clear the air. I asked her if she knew about the dog. She said, "Yeah, but they thought it would help the grandkids." That told me everything I needed to know about where she stood. So I made a new call. Aunt Betty, my mom's older sister. She didn't talk much at family gatherings. But when she did, people shut up and listened. She had no kids, no husband, no filter, and no fear of anyone, including my parents, especially my parents. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year, but she picked up on the second ring. "Hey, it's Amanda," I said. I told her everything. I kept my voice flat, didn't sugarcoat any of it. The dog, the phones, the account, the silence. I told her how they acted like I was the one who betrayed them, how they treated me like a resource they'd been denied. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said only 2 things. "Come stay with me. I'll handle the rest." I didn't ask what handle meant. I didn't need to. That night, I packed up what I had at Tess's. Clothes, laptop, dog crate, the essentials. I hugged her goodbye, thanked her 100 times, and got in the car with Coda. He curled up in the back seat and slept most of the way. 2 hours later, we pulled into Betty's driveway. Her house was on the edge of a small town, tucked behind trees, quiet and sharp-looking, just like her. When I walked in, she had a guest room ready. Bed made, towels folded, a clean bowl already set out for Coda. She didn't ask me how I was doing. She didn't need to. Later that night, while I was unpacking, I heard her phone buzz in the kitchen. Then I heard her voice, low, direct. "We need to talk in person, and don't bring your usual crap. I'm not Amanda." I didn't hear the other side, but I knew exactly who she was talking to. Probably both of them. Betty was the nuclear option, the one they never thought I'd call. And now they'd have to deal with her, not me. I lay in bed that night, Coda curled up beside me, breathing steady and warm. My mom used to say, "Family sticks together no matter what," right after doing something that made me want to disappear. But as I lay there in that quiet, clean room, I realized something I'd never let myself believe before. Sometimes family is the problem. 2 days after I got to Aunt Betty's, she came into the guest room with a cup of tea and said, "Real casual. Don't plan anything after lunch." Then she left before I could ask what she meant. I didn't ask. I knew. I spent the morning scrolling rental listings with Coda's head on my lap. He was finally starting to relax again. It hit me then how tense he'd been back at the house, always alert, always watching. Now here at Betty's, he was snoring, stretching out like he had nothing to worry about. Right before 1 p.m., Betty put on her coat, grabbed a folder off the kitchen counter, and told me, "Keep your phone close." Then she walked out and drove off without another word. She was gone for about an hour and a half. When she got back, she didn't say much, just handed me a bag from the bakery in town, patted Coda's head, and sat at the table with her tea like she hadn't just gone into battle. My phone started going off right after. My mom first. "You didn't need to bring Betty into this." That was low. Then my brother, "Wow, real mature. Hope you're proud of yourself." Then my dad called, which he never does. I didn't answer. I just watched the screen light up until it stopped. Betty took one look at the messages and finally broke the silence. "They're embarrassed." That's good. I asked her what she said to them. She smirked and said, "I reminded them what happens when you cross someone who remembers everything." Later, I got more details. She walked straight into the house without knocking. My mom tried to fake warmth like nothing had happened. My dad stood behind her with that fake calm he uses when he thinks he still has the upper hand. Betty didn't waste time. She laid everything out. What they did with Coda. How they used my money. How they cut my phone line and changed the Wi-Fi. She called it what it was. Manipulation. And when my mom tried to protest, Betty shut it down. She told them they'd been treating me like a servant, not a daughter. That I wasn't running away. I was finally taking my life back. She said if they didn't stop texting, calling, or trying to get into my accounts, she'd personally take every detail public. She even said she'd already spoken to someone at the local paper. A bluff, probably, but knowing Betty, I wouldn't be shocked. Then she told my dad she knew all about the work he did without permits on the garage, and she'd be happy to drop some photos off at the inspector's office. They shut up. She left. And somehow, in true my family fashion, their takeaway wasn't we messed up. It was Amanda turned someone against us. That night, while Betty watched TV, I checked my email and got a security alert from my new bank. 3 failed login attempts. They were still trying to access my account. Still couldn't believe I had the nerve to lock them out. But that wasn't the worst part. A few minutes later, I got a Venmo request from my dad. $200. The note said, for the expenses you owe us. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was just so on brand. That's who they were. Sell my dog, steal from my account, then ask me to pay them. The next day, I toured an apartment about 40 minutes away. Nothing fancy. 2nd floor, no elevator. Weird smell in the hallway, but it had space, sunlight, and it allowed dogs. I signed the lease on the spot. The landlord asked if I needed a few days to think. I told him I'd been thinking for years. When I got back to Betty's that evening, I told her I'd be moving out next week. She didn't say congratulations. She didn't hug me. She just nodded once and said, make sure they don't get your new address. That night, I declined the Venmo request and blocked my dad. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. I felt awake. They still thought I was just blowing off steam. That I'd come back when I cooled down. That I'd forgive and forget like I always did. But this time was different. This time, they weren't just losing access to my money. They were losing access to me. Move-in day felt surreal. I kept waiting for something to go wrong. For a call from the landlord, a sudden text from my mom, anything to pull me back, but nothing happened. I signed the papers, got the keys, and carried the first box up the narrow stairs alone. The apartment was small and kind of ugly, if I'm honest. The walls were stained a weird beige. The fridge made a knocking sound every 10 minutes. And the living room had one sad overhead light that flickered when it got too quiet. But it was mine. No one telling me to clean up after someone else. No one asking where I'd been. No one pretending like I owed them something for existing. I sat on the floor with Coda, surrounded by boxes, and just stared at the silence. He leaned against my side and sighed like he understood. Maybe he did. I hadn't told anyone where I was moving. Not even my brother. Especially not my mom. Only Aunt Betty knew. And I told her not to share a single detail. Not the address, not the town, not even the zip code. The first night, I slept on a borrowed mattress with a blanket that smelled like Betty's laundry soap. I woke up to 19 missed calls. I didn't even have that many friends. They were all from my parents, my brother, his wife, and one from a number I didn't recognize. Probably my mom using someone else's phone. Then the messages started again. From my brother? So you just ghost us? That's your move now. From my mom? You don't have to live like this. You're being dramatic. From my dad? You could have talked to us. Now look what you've done. I blocked all of them one by one. I didn't even read the last 2. I didn't need to. Then Betty called. They showed up here, she said, calm as ever. I didn't say anything at first. They brought pie. You believe that? Store-bought, too. She said my mom tried to hug her, that my dad stood behind her like some hired muscle, and that my brother didn't speak until Betty asked him if he had anything to say. He mumbled something about this being taken too far. Betty told them I'd moved out and didn't want contact. She didn't tell them where. My mom apparently got quiet like she was calculating her next move. She asked if I was safe, if I was seeing someone, like suddenly they cared. Then she pulled out the real card. We're ready to forgive her if she wants to come home. Betty laughed in her face. She told them no one needed their forgiveness, that I hadn't done anything wrong, that it wasn't about being emotional, it was about being done. Then she told them something that shut it all down. If you loved her even half as much as you love controlling her, none of this would have happened. They left after that. A few days later, I found an envelope wedged between Betty's screen door and the porch. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a note handwritten from my mom that said, "You're still our daughter. We made mistakes, but that doesn't erase what we've done for you. One day when you have kids of your own, maybe you'll understand how hard this was for us. Please come home so we can move forward." There was the signature twist. What we've done for you. Like years of using me justified this. I showed the note to Betty. She didn't say anything, just lit the fireplace, tossed it in, and asked if I wanted tea. That was the moment I knew. Not just that I was done with them, I already knew that, but that I was done explaining myself to anyone. That same night, I took photos of my new place. Nothing fancy, just a couch, Coda sleeping by the window, a little shelf I built myself. I thought for 1 second about sending them the photos, about showing them what they'd lost. But then I realized they didn't care about me. They cared about access to me. So I didn't send anything. And I made a decision right there. I would never invite them over. Not for dinner, not for holidays, not to make peace, not even to show them what they could have been part of if they had treated me like a human being instead of a wallet. I didn't need their drama in my living room. I didn't need their apologies now that Betty had scared them into pretending they cared. They'd sold my dog. They sold my dog and thought I'd get over it for the sake of family. I chose peace instead. And nothing they say or do is ever getting past my front door again. 3 months passed before I even realized it. Life in the new apartment settled into this steady rhythm that felt almost unreal at first. No yelling in the mornings. No footsteps pacing outside my door. No random requests for money disguised as family duties. Just me, my dog, and a cheap little home with flickering lights that somehow felt safer than any house I'd lived in before. Coda adjusted faster than I did. He learned the sounds of the building. The neighbor with the heavy boots. The kid upstairs who loved dropping things. The old refrigerator that groaned like a tired animal. He'd curl up beside the couch every night, stretch his paws across my lap, and drift off like he had never known anything but quiet. I think that's when it hit me the most how peaceful he'd become, because everything they did to me, they did to him too. The first sign that my family hadn't moved on yet came one Saturday morning. Someone buzzed my building's front door. The sound echoed through the hallway, unfamiliar and sharp. I wasn't expecting anyone. No packages, no maintenance calls. I froze where I was standing, drying a pan. The buzzer went off twice more. I checked the window facing the street. I didn't recognize the woman waiting by the entrance. She held a small brown box in her hands like it was something delicate. She didn't say her name when I asked who she was through the speaker. She just said it was a delivery for Amanda. I didn't let her in. She left the box by the mailboxes and walked off without looking back. Inside was a framed photo of me, my parents, and my brother from some long ago summer. I must have been 9. My mom had her arms around both of us and I was holding a melting ice cream cone. Someone had taped a note to the back of the frame. "We miss you. Please reach out. Let's talk." No signature, but I didn't need one. I put the frame back into the box and stored it in the closet. It didn't feel right to throw it away, but I wasn't about to display it either. 2 days later, I changed the locks. A week after that, I got an email on the old account I barely checked anymore. It was long, almost an essay. My mom had written it. She talked about Christmas, about how the kids asked where I was, about how Dad was struggling. She said they'd been reflecting on everything. For a second, a small second, I thought there might be an apology somewhere. There wasn't. The closest she came was, "We've made mistakes, but you've made things very difficult by cutting us out so harshly." Then the kicker, "No matter what happened, we didn't deserve the way Betty spoke to us. You should have confronted us privately instead of humiliating us." There was again. Not regret, not understanding, just embarrassment. They were sorry about consequences, not actions. I didn't reply. I closed the email and finally deleted the entire account. Everything tied to them gone with one click. My life now looks nothing like the one they controlled. I work remotely with a new job that doesn't require me to drive past their neighborhood. I take Coda on long walks before sunset. I started a photography class downtown, and most weekends I bring home stacks of prints that clutter the dining table. There's a plant on the window I haven't killed yet. I hosted a movie night for myself last Friday and didn't hear one raised voice in the entire building. Every day feels like a place I wasn't allowed to reach before. Of course, some nights I sit on the couch and wonder who I'd be if they treated me differently. If they'd asked instead of demanded. If they'd loved instead of used. But the thought always fades the same way. If they'd ever cared, I wouldn't be here. The peace is strange, but it's mine. I never sent them my new address. Never told them what city I moved to. Never answered a call or text. And the longer the silence stretches, the easier it becomes. People talk about cutting off family like it's burning down a house. For me, it felt more like finally stepping outside one and letting the door close behind me for good. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Cover my son's college. My brother ordered, handing me a $15,000 bill. Dorm, laptop, meal plan. I said, not happening. Days later, I heard him tell Dad, don't worry. After Christmas dinner, she'll pay. Dad nodded. That's his role. So I changed the plans. On December 25th, they went crazy when they found out. My name's Grace. I'm 34, no kids, never married, and I make decent money as a systems analyst. I have a nice place in Durham, North Carolina, a paid-off car, and no debts. Sounds like a stable life, right? That's exactly why my family treats me like their personal ATM. This started 2 months before Christmas. I got a text from my older brother, Dennis. No hi or how are you? Just, cover my son's college. Dorm, laptop, meal plan comes to about $15,000. Need it before December ends. I laughed, then realized he was serious. Dennis has always been arrogant. He got a girl pregnant at 20, married her in a courthouse, and spent the next decade drifting between jobs, constantly between gigs, and borrowing money he never returned. His son, Caleb, is 18 and honestly a good kid. But Dennis? He's been leeching off our parents for years and lately decided I was his new target. I texted back, not happening. No reply, just silence for 3 days. Then I got wind of something. A friend of mine works at the same gym my dad goes to. She overheard him chatting with Dennis after their workout. Dennis said, don't worry. After Christmas dinner, she'll pay. She always does. And my dad. He nodded and said, that's her role. Her role, as in me, Grace, the walking wallet, the good little sister who owes it to the family for having it easy. They say I don't have a husband or kids. So what do I even need money for? I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I smiled when they invited me to Christmas dinner. I said I'd bring dessert and a few gifts. My mom was thrilled. I was polite. I even helped Dennis's wife buy a dress online for the holidays, pretending I didn't know what they were all planning. But while they were getting ready for a generous check after turkey and ham, I was changing the rules of the game. On December 15th, I called my credit card company and removed my brother as an authorized user. He didn't know he was about to lose his emergency gas and food lifeline. Then I called my insurance and took him off my car plan. Yep, that second-hand Toyota Camry he's been driving around for months was registered under my name. He thought I forgot. I didn't. He had a grace period until January 1st, but I knew he wouldn't read the fine print until it was too late. December 25th came. Christmas. Everyone was there. Caleb, my nephew, came over to hug me. Poor kid, he had no clue. Dennis was unusually cheerful. I knew he was already counting the money. I'd even brought envelopes with me to make it more fun. After dinner, my dad raised a glass. To family, he said. To generosity. Dennis leaned back in his chair. So, Grace, he said. About Caleb. I pulled out an envelope and handed it over. He opened it fast. His eyes shifted. Inside wasn't a check. It was a note, typed neat and to the point. This year, I'm giving gifts only to those who don't expect them. I'm also reclaiming what's mine. The car, the card, the control. Merry Christmas. He blinked, then laughed. What the hell is this? My mom asked what was going on. Dennis stood up, face red, note crumpling in his hand. I stayed seated. Your car insurance expires in 6 days, I said. Your card access is already gone. Caleb can still go to college. You can figure it out like every other parent. Silence, then yelling. Accusations. My mom looked shocked, my dad furious. But I didn't budge. I had more than ruined their little plan. I had rewritten the entire game. The day after Christmas, I woke up to a phone vibrating itself off the nightstand. 15 missed calls. 7 from my mom, 4 from Dennis. The rest from cousins I barely talked to, and 1 from Aunt Sheila, who usually only calls when someone's in the hospital or pregnant. They moved fast. By noon, the family group chat was lit up like a bonfire. Messages stacked so fast I couldn't even finish one before 3 more popped up. All of them calling me selfish, cruel, cold-hearted, and a few things that didn't even make sense. My mom accused me of traumatizing Caleb. Dennis kept writing variations of, "You'll regret this," and "You crossed the line." My dad was silent, not one message, which somehow made it worse. It didn't take long before things got ugly in a different way. My cousin Kelly posted some vague garbage on Facebook. It's always the ones with no family of their own who try to ruin everyone else's. You'll die alone, sis. She didn't tag me, but she didn't have to. Then came the whispers. I went to my local grocery store that weekend and ran into June, a woman who's known my mom since the early 90s. She leaned in like she was about to tell me I'd won the lottery. "You doing okay? After everything that came out about you and that married man at work." I looked her dead in the face. "What married man?" She just blinked, then mumbled something and walked away. By the time I got to the parking lot, I knew my family hadn't just turned against me. They'd started a smear campaign. That story, the one about me and some coworker, was completely made up. Never happened. But in a family like mine, truth doesn't matter. Gossip does. And it didn't stop there. Over the next few days, friends started reaching out with awkward messages. "Hey, I heard some things. Just wanted to check in if you ever need to talk." People assumed I'd done something shameful, that maybe I had snapped, that maybe the family had a point. And that's when I realized I wasn't just the villain now. I was the scapegoat, the sacrifice, the problem. But I wasn't about to sit around and let it happen. While they kept talking about me, I started making quiet moves. I left the group chat. I blocked Dennis. I blocked our parents. Then I pulled out the spreadsheet I'd been keeping for 6 months. Every dollar I'd ever loaned to Dennis, every expense I'd covered for my parents without so much as a thank you, totaled more than $47,000. I printed it, not to get it back, I knew I never would. I just wanted a reminder, proof of why I was done. I stopped returning calls. I didn't show up to Caleb's graduation dinner. And most importantly, I started researching apartments outside of North Carolina. Quietly, no social media posts, no conversations about it with anyone, not even my closest friends. I contacted a realtor in Seattle. Looked into a transfer within my company. There was an opening at their West Coast office. Same job, better pay, new state, new start. I was planning a clean break because I knew what was coming next. They would panic. They'd realize I wasn't just angry. I was done. But I didn't expect what happened next. I'd only told one person, my coworker Jenna, about the possible move. She helped me figure out neighborhoods and was the only one I trusted. But someone else found out because 2 weeks later, my mom showed up at my condo uninvited. She knocked like nothing had happened. No text, no warning. Just stood there holding a plastic container of lasagna like that would make me forget what they'd done. "We need to talk," she said, and I could already tell someone had leaked my plan. The rumors had flipped the other way now. Not about my personal life. Now they were terrified I was leaving for good. And with me would go the money, the car, the free rides, and every backup plan they'd ever counted on. But they had no idea how far I'd already gone. I let her in, not because I wanted to, but because I was curious. Curious how my mother was going to spin everything she and the rest of them had done. The lies, the rumors, the Facebook drama, the total character assassination. She sat on the edge of my couch and acted like we were just catching up. 10 minutes of small talk. Lasagna on the table, smiling like we were still family. Then she dropped it. "We know you're moving." I didn't flinch, just waited. "We just want to understand why you're not thinking clearly, Grace." There it was, I'd been downgraded from selfish to unstable. I didn't respond, just stood there. Then she added, like she was saying something reassuring, "Dennis says you're only doing this because you've been feeling lonely and angry and maybe confused." Confused. She nodded like this was some kind of intervention. "You don't need to move across the country to feel better. You need to be with your family, where people care about you." And then she pulled something out of her purse. A folded piece of paper. It was a power of attorney form. Dennis had drawn it up. It gave him access to manage my financial accounts in the event of emotional distress or impaired judgment. He'd written that I had shown erratic behavior, including abandonment of familial duties, financial hostility, and social instability. They were trying to make it legal, to make it look like I was having some kind of breakdown so they could freeze my accounts and keep me from leaving. He was trying to trap me. And the worst part, my dad had already signed as a witness. They were going to file it in January if I didn't get help. I told her to leave. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't threaten. Just told her to get out before I called the police. I shredded the form after she left. But that night I didn't sleep because they weren't just trying to stop me anymore. They were trying to take control of me. So I accelerated everything. The next morning, I emailed my job and confirmed the transfer to Seattle. Put in notice with my landlord, paid 3 months upfront to break the lease, hired movers. I even arranged to ship my car across the country instead of driving it. I was done playing safe. But then something strange happened. That Friday, I came home from work and saw a car I didn't recognize parked near my condo. Same the next day, different plate, same model. Then, 2 days before the movers were scheduled to arrive, someone tried to get into my building using my name. The front desk told them no, but the guy had said he was my brother. Dennis wasn't giving up. I filed a restraining order the next day. My lawyer said it might not stick, but it was a start. And I made one last move. I scheduled my flight out 3 days earlier than I told anyone. The movers would finish the job without me there. I'd already packed what I needed in 2 suitcases. And when I landed in Seattle at 6:40 a.m., I turned my phone on to 48 new messages. Some begging, some threatening, some just saying, "Come back." But it was too late. I was gone. Or so I thought. The first week in Seattle felt surreal. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in a quiet area just outside the city. Gray skies, unfamiliar streets, the smell of rain on concrete. It was the first time in my adult life I woke up without some obligation tied to my family. No group chat pings. No, "Can you send me a quick $200? Texts. No sudden, guilt-tripping calls. Just silence. Felt good until it didn't. A week after I moved in, I got a letter. Not an email, a physical letter forwarded from my old address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No return address, just a printed message. "Seattle won't fix what's wrong with you. You'll come back. You always do." I stared at it for a while. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature. Dennis. I threw it away, but the feeling stuck. That thing where you know someone's watching, even if you can't prove it. I got paranoid. Started double-checking my locks. I even set up a camera by my front door. Nothing showed up for days, so I tried to shake it off. Maybe he just wanted to rattle me. I focused on work. My team welcomed me quickly. I finally told Jenna everything. The letter, the power of attorney stunt, the fake rumors. She told me I should have cut them off years ago. Things were finally smoothing out until I got a call from HR. Someone had submitted an anonymous report to my company's ethics hotline. They claimed I had lied on my employment transfer paperwork. Said I was leaving the North Carolina office because I'd been caught in a relationship with a married manager. That I'd caused a hostile environment and fled before an internal investigation. It was a copycat of the exact rumor my family had spread, now repackaged as an HR concern. They had no proof, of course, because none of it was true, but HR still had to look into it. I had to sit through interviews, explain everything again, rehash my move, my personal life, my reasons for relocating. It dragged on for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of sitting at my desk, wondering if I just risked everything to move across the country, only to have it all pulled out from under me because of a vengeful family member. But the investigation closed quietly. No evidence, no issue, just a note from HR saying I was in the clear. Still, something had changed. I started getting headaches. Couldn't focus like before. Every time I got an email late at night, my stomach dropped. Then one night I got another letter. This one was handwritten. Sloppy penmanship. Multiple pages. It was from my father. He said the family had decided I was no longer welcome. That I'd broken their trust. That I had abandoned Caleb when he needed me most. That I had embarrassed the family with my unstable behavior. And worst of all, they were cutting ties with me officially. The words were ugly. But what hit hardest was how he ended it. Do not return. You are no longer one of us. That was it. I sat in my kitchen and read it over and over until the ink blurred. My own father had written me off like a canceled subscription. But something about that moment snapped the fear in me. They had downed me, but in doing so, they'd finally freed me. I started therapy, deleted every trace of them from my phone. I stopped checking for letters. I started hiking, taking long walks by the sound, meeting new people, and slowly the silence stopped feeling like a threat. It started feeling like peace. Till 6 months later, I got a message. Not from Dennis, not from my parents, from Caleb. One line. They want to see you just for a few days. They said they're sorry. I stared at Caleb's message for a long time. I hadn't heard from him since the night everything blew up at Christmas. And unlike the rest of them, I never held a grudge against him. He was a kid caught between a manipulative father and a family that treated guilt like currency. His message was short, simple. They want to see you just for a few days. They said they're sorry. At first, I didn't respond, but I thought about it every day for a week. Then I finally asked, is this really from you, or is someone telling you to say that? He wrote back almost instantly. It's from me, I promise. They told me to reach out because they don't think you'll respond to them. But I wouldn't have sent it if I didn't mean it. I told him I'd think about it, and I did for 2 weeks. Eventually, I booked a 3-day trip back to North Carolina. Not for them, for Caleb. I didn't tell anyone else I was coming. I flew in late, got a hotel near downtown, and met Caleb for coffee the next morning. He looked older, tired maybe, but real, sincere. He didn't push me to go see the others. Just talked about college, about feeling caught in the middle, about missing the version of the family we both used to believe existed. Finally, I asked what made them change their minds. He hesitated, then said, they didn't. They just want the money back. But I think you should still come. If not for them, then to say what you really want to say. That was the most honest answer I could have hoped for. So, the next day I showed up at my parents' house. I didn't even knock. I walked in like I used to back when I thought I belonged there. They were all sitting in the living room. My dad, my mom, Dennis, even his wife, who usually stays out of the mess. Caleb stood near the hallway, arms folded. No one said anything at first. Then, Dennis stood up like he was hosting a meeting. Thanks for coming. I waited. My dad spoke next. We've had time to reflect. Things got out of hand. My mom added, family fights, but we can fix this. I didn't say a word. Then Dennis handed me a folder. I opened it. Inside was a document titled Voluntary Family Contribution Agreement. It laid out terms, specific amounts of money I'd contribute each year to Caleb's education, family emergencies, and general household support. A minimum of $22,000 annually. I looked at them one by one. They were serious. My dad actually said, this is how we move forward. It's a gesture of good faith. That's when I realized this had never been about an apology. They'd brought me back to reestablish the pipeline. The cash, the convenience. They thought I was softened by distance, by time, by silence. I stood up, didn't yell, didn't rip the paper, didn't even smirk. I just looked at Caleb. You knew this was coming? He shook his head. I swear I didn't. I walked out, got back to the hotel, booked an earlier flight. At 5:40 a.m. the next morning, I was back in the airport. But just as I was boarding, I got one final text from Dennis. Nice seeing you. Don't worry. I'll tell everyone what really happened between you and that VP in Seattle. Bet they'd love to hear it. I blocked him. I didn't cry on the plane. I didn't feel anything really until I landed. That's when I opened my laptop, logged into my legal doc service, and uploaded every piece of evidence I had. The fake power of attorney, the texts, the fake HR complaint, the letter from my dad downing me, the new contribution agreement. And I forwarded them all to my lawyer with one sentence. I want nothing tying me to them ever again. The first update. 6 months went by. By then, my life in Seattle had finally started to feel like mine. I'd made real friends. I hiked every weekend. I went to dinners where no one asked me to Venmo them afterward or hint at meeting, just a little help until Friday. My job got better, too. I got promoted. I started dating someone cautiously, and I told him everything early on. For once, I didn't feel like I had to hide who I was or where I came from. My family? I hadn't heard a word until late August. I got an email from an address I didn't recognize at first, but it was Caleb. It was long. No manipulation, no guilt, just honest words. He said things had changed since I left. That Dennis had been forced to get a full-time job after my financial support stopped. That my mom had gotten sick a few months earlier. Nothing terminal, but enough to shake the foundation they thought would always be there. And then he wrote this. I think they're ready to admit they treated you horribly. They asked me to reach out. They want you to come back just for a few days. Not to fix anything, just to say they're sorry. I stared at that email like it was in another language. They never apologized. That wasn't who they were. Apologies meant admitting you were wrong, and my parents had never done that once in my life. I didn't respond right away. 2 days later, I got a letter, handwritten this time, from my mom. She said she was sorry for letting Dennis treat me like a bank. She said she believed the rumors because it was easier than facing what they'd done. And at the end, she said, "You were the strong one, Grace. That's why we used you. I hate that it took losing you to see that." For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry. I felt tired, but something in me wanted to go. Not for closure, not even out of curiosity, just to see if they'd really changed or if this was just another trick dressed up in new words. So I went. 2 weeks later, I flew back. No one met me at the airport. I didn't expect them to. I stayed at the same hotel, didn't tell them my room number. When I showed up at the house, Caleb answered the door. He didn't smile or hug me, just nodded and stepped aside. Inside it was different. Not cleaner, not quieter, just heavier. Like the place was carrying the weight of everything they'd done. Dennis came into the room and didn't say anything for a full minute. Then he looked at me and said, "You were right about all of it. That was it. No excuses, no qualifiers." My mom came out of the kitchen. She looked older, smaller, like the version of her I remembered had been drained out and replaced with someone who'd finally stopped pretending she had it all under control. And my dad? He didn't say much. But before I left that day, he pulled me aside and said one thing. "You don't owe us anything, but we owe you the truth." I'm sorry. I stayed 3 days. No one asked for money. No one handed me a contract. There was no talk about the past unless I brought it up. It wasn't warm. It wasn't comfortable, but it was real. On the last night before I left, Caleb walked me to the car. He said, "I hope you come back again, but even if you don't, I'm glad you came this time." I drove to the hotel in silence. That night, I cried for the first time since Christmas. Not out of sadness or relief, just release. Because I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't need them to be different. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy for walking away. Now, I still live in Seattle and I still keep my distance. But the power they had over me, gone. And for the first time in my life, I'm not the one chasing peace anymore. Now on to the next story. Story 9. I spent my savings to buy a house for my sister, but she didn't invite me to the housewarming party. "Money can't buy respect," she said a week later when I announced the sale of the house. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to let people walk all over me. I worked hard, saved my money, and made responsible decisions. I wasn't the type to throw my earnings away on people who didn't deserve it. At least, that's what I believed. But then came the relentless pressure from my parents. It started right after Melissa got married. My mom and dad sat me down, looked dead serious, and laid it out for me. Melissa and Nick need a house, my mom said, crossing her arms like it wasn't even a discussion. They're in a good financial position, Jeremy. It's time for you to step up for your family. I almost laughed at how casually they said it, like I should just nod and write a check. They don't need a house, I said. They can rent like everybody else. Mom scoffed. And waste money on rent with a baby on the way? Dad chimed in. We don't have room for them here, and you know it. Either they move in with you or you help them out. Be a man about it. I shook my head. Not my responsibility. They should have thought about all this before they got married. That was my first mistake. Thinking my refusal actually mattered. From that day on, they made it their personal mission to wear me down. Every single conversation revolved around the same guilt trip. Mom would text me long paragraphs about how family takes care of each other. Dad constantly reminded me that I was able to help while Melissa and Nick were just getting started. And Melissa, she never even asked me. She let our parents do all the work, as if she just expected me to do it. For a month, they pestered me. Calls at odd hours, surprise visits where they'd sit in my apartment and bring it up again and again. When I ignored my phone, they'd leave voicemails dripping with disappointment. Mom even cried once, saying, I raised you better than this. Finally, I broke. Not because I agreed with them, not because I wanted to, but because I was just so tired. Fine. You want a house? You got a house. I spent almost all my savings. $293,000, including repairs and furniture, on a place for them. It wasn't a mansion, but it was nice, ready to move in, with a backyard and a safe neighborhood for the baby they kept throwing in my face. I signed the paperwork, took care of everything legally. It was my house, but I had every intention of giving it to them as a gift. The last step was to give them the keys, but right before that, I had to leave town for a few days. While I was gone, my parents decided it was best not to wait. They gave Melissa and Nick the keys and let them move in without me. I didn't think much of it at first. When I got back, I stopped by to congratulate them, expecting at least a thank you. Instead, they barely acknowledged me. They were busy unpacking, moving boxes, setting up furniture. It was like I was a delivery guy who had overstayed his welcome. Nick barely looked at me. Melissa mumbled something about how they were still getting settled and didn't have time to chat. I stood there for a second waiting, but nothing. No excitement, no gratitude, no offer to show me the house I paid for. I walked away, telling myself not to take it personally. Maybe they were overwhelmed. Maybe they were just busy. Maybe I expected too much. That was Monday. Then it was Saturday. I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw Melissa's post. A full-blown housewarming party. The place was packed. Friends, extended family, neighbors, and right there in the photos, my parents. The caption. Now we have our own place, like all normal Americans. Life is easy. I wasn't invited. Something inside me snapped. I must have read that headline 10 times, feeling my blood pressure rise with each word. Now we have our own place like all normal Americans. Life is easy. And as if they had earned it, like they did it themselves. The party was in full swing, judging by the pictures. Tables full of food, drinks flowing, people laughing. A celebration. My parents were there, smiling, having a great time. Even distant relatives I hadn't seen in years were there. But me, the guy who paid for it all, was nowhere to be found. I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to call Melissa right then and there, demand an explanation, ask how the hell she thought this was okay. But I didn't. I knew I'd just get some dismissive excuse or a fake apology. No, this wasn't something I was going to let slide over the phone. The next morning I drove to her, no, my house. Melissa opened the door, still in her pajamas, holding a coffee cup as if she had all the time in the world. Oh, she said, blinking. Did you text first? We're kind of. Why wasn't I invited? I cut her off. Her eyes flickered with something. Annoyance, guilt. She took a sip of her coffee as if she needed a second to think. Jeremy, come on. It was just a little get-together. Small. Half the family was there. Mom and Dad were there. People I haven't spoken to in years were there. But not me. She sighed as if I was being dramatic. Look, we didn't think you'd be comfortable. It wasn't about you, okay? I let out a sharp laugh. Not about me? I bought this house. Melissa. Nick appeared in the hallway with his arms crossed. Dude, it's just a housewarming. Don't make this weird. I ignored him. All I wanted was a thank you. You didn't even acknowledge me when I came over. You acted like I was some random guest. And now this. Melissa put down her coffee and tilted her head like she was explaining something to a child. Money can't buy respect, Jeremy. I stared at her, trying to process what I had just heard. What? She crossed her arms. You decided to buy this house for us. That was your choice. But that doesn't mean we have to bow down and worship you for it. Frankly, I think it's kind of pathetic. If I were you, I wouldn't have done it. I'd have some self-respect. I felt something snap inside of me. So, let me get this straight. You think I'm a loser for buying you a house? She shrugged. I mean, yeah, it's kind of sad. You're so desperate for people to like you that you threw away almost 300 grand on us, and I still don't respect you any more than before. If anything, I respect you less. Nick chuckled. I looked at him, then back at my sister. I took a deep breath and smiled. You must have forgotten, or maybe you never bothered to check whose name is on the deed to this house. Melissa's face paled for the first time. Nick straightened. Wait, what do you mean? I stepped back toward the door. I mean that you two better start packing, because by the end of the week, you won't be living here anymore. Panic flashed across their faces, but I didn't give them a chance to react. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. Let's see how easy life is now. By the time I got back to my car, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Calls from Melissa, calls from my parents. I ignored them all. I needed a moment to enjoy the thought of them scrambling as they realized their little fantasy was about to collapse. It didn't take long for the real collapse to begin. Barely an hour later, I was at home when I heard a loud banging on my door. I didn't even have to look. I knew exactly who it was. I opened it to see my mother standing there, arms flailing, eyes wide as if I had just announced I was selling her kidneys. You can't do this, Jeremy, she screamed, pushing past me into my apartment. My dad followed, more quietly but with the same look of disbelief. I shut the door behind them. Actually, I can. Where are they going? My mother demanded. You have a baby on the way. Do you even think before you act? I crossed my arms. You mean like they thought before throwing a party and not inviting me? Or before they called me a loser for helping them? Mom waved her hand like that was irrelevant. Melissa is your sister, and Nick is family now. You don't just take a house away from family. I laughed and shook my head. That's funny because when you were pushing me to buy it, you made it pretty clear that it wasn't my house anymore. But now that I'm selling it, suddenly it's mine again. Huh. Dad finally spoke, his voice firm. Son, let's be reasonable. You already spent the money. Just let it stay. What's done is done. I looked between them and realized something. They weren't mad at Melissa. They weren't mad at Nick. No, in their eyes, I was the problem. I was the bad guy because I dared to stand up for myself. I shook my head. No, I'm done being the family ATM. They are moving out this week, or they are dealing with a realtor. You're evicting your pregnant sister. Mom gasped, as if I had just admitted to committing a war crime. She did it to herself, I said. She could have been grateful. She could have not insulted me to my face. But she made it clear what she thought of me, so now she can find out. Mom turned to Dad. Say something. Dad sighed. Come on, Jeremy. Do you really want to create this kind of tension in the family? I stared at him. You created this. You and Mom were the ones who backed me into a corner, made me feel like I had no choice. Now that I'm taking back control, suddenly I'm being unreasonable. Mom's voice dropped to a deep, almost threatening tone. If you do this, you'll tear this family apart. I let out a breath, then looked her dead in the eye. Then consider it torn. She flinched as if I had slapped her. Dad clenched his jaw, but neither of them had anything else to say. I walked to the door and opened it wide. If you're done trying to make me feel guilty, you can go now. I have a house to sell. Mom cried as they left. Dad shook his head in disappointment. But I felt nothing. They had made me feel like I owed Melissa my life, like my hard-earned savings were just there to be handed over. But now they were about to learn a hard lesson. Melissa and Nick had a week, and I wasn't bluffing. It took less than 2 hours for Melissa to show up at my door. Not knocking like our mother had done. No, she had a different strategy. When I opened it, she was standing there looking pitiful. Red eyes like she'd been crying, arms wrapped around herself. If I didn't know her better, I might have thought she was genuinely sorry. "Jeremy, please." I leaned against the door frame. "Please what?" She sniffled. "I know I said things I shouldn't have. I was just stressed. You know what pregnancy hormones are like." Ah, there it was. The poor pregnant woman card. I crossed my arms. "So when you called me a loser and laughed at me for helping you, that was just hormones talking?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, I didn't mean any of that. I was just overwhelmed with the move and the baby and everything. You know? I really appreciate what you did for us." I tilted my head. "Funny, you've never really said that before." Her lip quivered. "You can't kick us out. We have nowhere to go." I shrugged. "Not my problem. I'm sure Mom and Dad will take you in." Her face instantly darkened. "They don't want us there." I raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe you should ask them why they won't help you, instead of expecting me to be your doormat." Melissa let out a frustrated breath. "Okay, fine. You want an apology?" "I'm sorry, Jeremy." There, I said it. I remained silent, waiting. She blinked. "What? Say what you're really sorry for." She hesitated. "I'm sorry I didn't invite you to the party." She shifted uncomfortably. "And for saying those things to you." I nodded, and her jaw clenched. "Jeremy, come on." I stared at her. "You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry that you need something from me now. But you're not sorry for using me. You're not sorry for treating me like garbage once you got what you wanted." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I smiled. "You have 6 days left." I started to close the door, but she grabbed it. "Wait, just let Nick and I rent the house from you, okay? We'll pay you every month. That way we won't have to move, and you'll still make money." I had to laugh at that. With what money? Nick can barely afford a tank of gas. "And if you think I'm going to come after you every month for rent, you're delusional." Her face flushed red. "I will pay you. You just have to trust me." I let out a slow breath. "Like how you trusted me enough to invite me to your housewarming party. Or how you trusted me enough not to talk crap about me the second you moved in." Her eyes darted sideways. She had nothing to say. I took that as my cue and slammed the door in her face. Less than a minute later, my phone buzzed with a text from her. "Melissa, I hope you know that selling the house doesn't make you any less of a loser. You'll always be alone, Jeremy. Enjoy your money." I grinned and put the phone down. We'll see if she still feels that way in a few days when she's carrying boxes back to Mom and Dad's house. When Saturday rolled around, I made it a point to stop by my house just to watch the show. Melissa and Nick were packing, their faces contorted in a mixture of anger and humiliation. Suitcases, boxes, random furniture. Everything was being shoved into their beat-up car. My parents were there too, standing off to the side, arms crossed, looking just as angry. They weren't angry at Melissa, they weren't angry at Nick. No, all their anger was focused on me. I leaned against my car, arms crossed, taking it all in. "Need some help." Melissa shot me a glare that could melt steel. "Go to hell, Jeremy." I smirked. "You sure? I mean, I helped you move in. Seems only fair that I help you move out." Nick slammed the trunk shut. "This is..." I shrugged. "What else did you expect?" He turned to me, face flushed. "We're your family, man. Who the hell kicks out their own pregnant sister?" I held up a finger. "Correction. I didn't kick you out. I just reminded you that this house was never yours to begin with." Melissa scoffed. "You think that makes you some kind of big man? You think you won?" I tilted my head. "I think I stopped being an idiot, if that's what you mean." Mom finally spoke up. Her arms crossed so tightly it looked like she was holding herself back from lunging at me. I hope you're happy, Jeremy. I hope this was worth it. You humiliated your own sister. You turned your back on your family. I raised an eyebrow. No, see, that's where you have it backwards. You all turned your backs on me as soon as I was no longer useful. Dad muttered under his breath and shook his head. Pathetic. I laughed at that. Pathetic? Pathetic? You call me pathetic? I didn't beg and manipulate someone to buy me a house. I didn't throw a party in the house I didn't pay for and act like I deserved it. And I sure as hell didn't insult the one person who made it all possible. Melissa rolled her eyes. Oh my God. Just shut up. You love playing the victim, don't you? I stared at her for a long second, then chuckled. You know what? I really don't. But I do love watching karma do its work. Nick kicked one of the packing boxes in frustration. This is so stupid. Agreed, I said. You two had a sweet deal. A free house, a fresh start. All you had to do was show a little common decency. But nope, that was too much trouble. Huh? Melissa gritted her teeth. You're so petty. I shrugged. You're right, I am petty. But you deserve this. Mom stepped forward and shook her head. Melissa, Nick, let's just go. He's made his choice. Let him rot alone in his empty house. I grinned. Oh, don't worry. It won't be empty for long. I already have buyers lined up. That quickly shut them up. Melissa's face twisted. You're really selling it? Yep. Should be off my hands in no time. She opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing more to say. A few minutes later, they were gone, crammed into their car, heading back to Mom and Dad's. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of their drama finally begin to lift. I had spent years being the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who could always be counted on. But today I was just me. A week after Melissa and Nick had been dragged back to my parents' house, my phone rang. I didn't need to check the caller ID. I already knew. I let it ring a few times, debating whether I even wanted to entertain whatever nonsense was coming next. But eventually, I picked up. Mom's voice was sharp, cutting straight to the point. After everything you've done, you are not our son anymore. I blinked. Wow. No warm-up. No fake attempt at making me feel guilty. Just straight to you're dead to us. You think this is funny? She snapped. You humiliated your sister. You made her life harder while she's pregnant. And for what? Your own ego? You disgust me. I leaned back in my chair, shaking my head. Let's go over this again, just for fun. You and Dad forced me to buy them a house. They took it without a shred of gratitude. They threw a housewarming party and didn't even invite me. Then, when I asked why, Melissa called me a loser for helping her. So I took back what was mine. And that makes me the bad guy. You abandoned your family, she hissed. I laughed. No, Mom. You abandoned me the second I stopped being useful. Silence. I could hear Dad in the background muttering something to her. But she ignored him. I imagined they had planned out this whole call, expecting me to beg for forgiveness or feel some kind of guilt. But all I felt was free. I sighed, already bored of the conversation. Do me a favor and lose my number. And with that, I hung up. I expected an immediate call back, maybe more angry texts, a dramatic voicemail, some attempt at dragging this out. Nothing. That was unexpected, but I wasn't about to complain. After that, I did the last thing I needed to do. I sold the house. I could have held out for a better price, but I just wanted it gone. The place was a reminder of how much money I had wasted on people who would never appreciate it. So, I knocked 25% off the asking price, knowing it would sell quickly. And it did. Melissa and Nick must have seen the listing, because 2 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. You're such a petty Jeremy. You could have let us stay. Instead, you threw money away just to prove a point. You'll always be a miserable loser. I stared at the message for a moment, then I deleted it. No response, no anger, just gone. Because the truth was, I did throw money away. I lost thousands of dollars. I lost my so-called family. I lost the illusion that people who share your blood will always have your back. But in return, I gained something far more valuable. I learned a lesson that most people take a lifetime to figure out. Never help people who don't appreciate it, especially family, because family is the one group of people who think they can take everything from you and you'll just take it. Not me. Not anymore. From now on, I only take care of one person, me. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.